jungle warfare was my thing. I was really good at it. I was that guy who would go to these foreign countries, train not just the commando stuff, but I would do martial arts with the indigenous force too. And I wanted to really be a combat diver. I thought it was really cool. But God, had a different plan for me. I kicked this guy, this Malaysian. I tried to kick him like a Muay Thai. He checked it and shattered my ankle. That put me out of pre-scuba. So I went to my sergeant major with a cast, and I said, I want to try out for, the SIFT teams. He allowed me to do it. Then I passed. I did fight on the side in Okinawa. So Okinawa, he had these dojos, and I trained in a lot of these dojos, and that opened me up to that fight world. There was a command sergeant major. His name was Jody. So Jody went to one of my best friends and said, hey, after his Muay Thai match, give him my business card and have him call me. I'm like, oh God, I'm in trouble. That's the command sergeant major first group, And he goes, he wants you to, call him. So I did. And he offered me a job in the unit. I said no.
Really?
Yeah.
As that wrapped up, what was kind of the next option for you?
Well,
Team Dog. Premium meals designed to keep your dog healthy, happy, and strong. To improve digestion, boost energy, and support a shiny coat. Non-GMO ingredients. No fillers, no gluten, no corn, no seed oils, and no soy. Just pure, high-quality ingredients to fuel your dog's best life. It was crafted by experts made for your dog. Navy SEAL K-9 trainer and nutritionists. Team Dog Food, where no piece goes to waste.
Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He served more than 23 years as a Green Beret, deploying to 27 countries, the founder of Ronin Tactics, author of The Way of the Ronin, Modern Samurai, which we're really going to get into the Bushido and Samurai Code as we progress through the interview. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Tu Lam.
hi, Mike.
Thank you for coming, man. I've been wanting to do this for pretty much since I started the show, and to be able to finally get to sit down with you is a real honor for me.
Thank you.
I sure appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
What's the last full book that you've read?
I'm really into the Bible these days.
Yeah.
Reading the gospel. I started off with the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, why Jesus, but a lot into the Bible these days, Gospel of John, Matthew's. So that's where I am, majority these days. I started on a healing journey in the last 10 years, and recently, trying to go back into my childhood, trying to heal a lot of my childhood traumas, which we'll go into, but, understanding how the nervous system works, the body keeps the score, Letting Go by David Hawkins, going over, how the nervous system attaches and how we're able to let it go, So, a lot of those type of self-help books these days.
Yeah. Speaking of the Bible, I'm curious, do you have like a daily or morning routine that you kind of stick to as far as that goes, and what does that look like?
I do. It took years to kind of develop this SOP that I have. When I first started, when Jesus saved me about 3 years ago, the Holy Spirit enters you, and He guides you. Literally, He guides you and directs you. And I used to get up in the mornings and meditate. Meditation for me is calming that nervous system, breath work. I have a grounding mat, a frequency mat that has the same frequencies, earth, and be able to ground yourself in the morning. But as my journey started, go deeper with the Holy Spirit and my walk with Jesus is, I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning now. And the reason why is because, that's the time where Jesus spoke to the Father. And they call it the fourth watch, the witching hour. After my time in the military and when I woke up, I used to face extreme anxieties. It just hits me right away. And I didn't know how to deal with. Meditation kind of calmed the nervous system. But at that point, I was emptying thoughts, emptying emotion to a point where you go to, they call it the still point. And that was great, but I wasn't feeling I wasn't feeling myself with anything. And now what I do is I wake up in the morning, I go into practice of meditation. I go cold plunge. So 3 o'clock in the morning, cold plunge.
Yeah.
Right off the bat. And I learned that from a Tibetan monk when I was up in the Himalayas. Why did these monks, bathe themselves in the morning in cold water, ice cold water, then they'll go into meditation practice. So I do that, and I go into my grounding mat, I empty, and then there's a certain point once I hit that state of stillness, then I put on the Bible. I have a Bible app. The Holy Spirit directs what he wants me to listen to. It's been Matthew's for the last 6 months, Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
Every morning, listening to it over and over. But what I found was through my breath work meditation, it slips past the conscious mind and it goes straight into the subconscious. And what I know is after about 2 months of that, the anxieties was gone.
Wow.
The nervous system calms. I start my day off powerful like that, really strong. I find like if I don't start it like that, and it's from 3 to 6, meditation, listening to the Bible, 3 to 6, and on that grounding mat. And then from 6 to 9, it's physical training, listening to the Bible and training. I used to listen to music, really hardcore music. You know how the teams are, right?
What's the most hardcore stuff you listen to?
Oh man, I'm
Slayer
from Fayetteville, North Carolina, so heavy rap, Tupac, just gangster, stuff for a little bit, and then the heavy metal stuff, just very violent, kind of loud type of music. Yeah, it gets the adrenaline up, but it gets your nervous system up too. So what I find now is if I work out to literally the gospel, it calms my nervous system, and that took a bit to be able to work out to that and not get bored. But now I crave it in the mornings, and if I don't do that sequence in the morning, my whole day is off.
Yeah.
So I would say that's how I surrender, to God every morning.
Yeah. Do you find one, I guess, what time do you typically go to bed getting up that early?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock, wow.
I find like after 8 o'clock, what do we usually do as a society? After 8 o'clock, it's worthless time, right? Unless you're working on something. But for the average, Westerner, we're probably watching TV, we're scrolling through social media, we're reading whatever, It's, my body needs the rest because, my morning routine is so powerful. So.
Yeah, so you're still getting seven hours or so of sleep. If you're traveling or kind of out of that routine, do you still get up at 3, like even when you travel?
Yes.
You still go through that same process, minus the plunge and the mat, I suppose? Yeah,
I was actually in Thailand a few years ago, and I, even if I travel around the world, I still try to get up no matter what time that is. I'm here, I got up at 3 o'clock this morning.
Yeah.
So that's a daily discipline for me.
Yeah. Do you cold shower when you're traveling?
I do.
Yeah. I do the same thing. I don't get up at 3. That's the one thing I will say. I typically get up at 7:30 or so, but a lot of your routine is the exact same as mine. Nice. I don't do the grounding mat, but I cold plunge or cold shower if I'm gone. It's one of the things I like about Colorado is even like a cold shower is about as cold as a cold plunge in a lot of those places, especially in the wintertime. But I'm the exact same way, though. I find that, I try to adhere to that as best I can when I travel, but not doing those things, it completely changes my day in all the worst ways, it's kind of astounding how big of an impact that can make. Similarly, I've been doing that routine for almost 4 years now, and at this point, it's like if I don't do it, it's like walking out of the house without your phone or your keys, or it's really fascinating how big of a difference that makes. Physical training wise, is there a program or kind of a script that you adhere to, or do you mix it up a lot, or?
So cardio every morning. I try to do at least an hour of cardio, but what I do is fast. So as you get older, the metabolism slows down. So I'm 51 now, and I have my metabolism slowing down. So what I found was that, I fast around 6 o'clock at night. I wake up, and at 3 o'clock in the morning. 6 o'clock is when I hit the physical training. So that's a good, amount of fasting already done. When I say that is I cut out sugars by noon, no carbs by noon. So when you wake up, your body's depleted of sugar and carbs. And then I hit the fat burning zones in the morning for an hour.
Yeah. Do you subscribe to that lower carb, primarily protein kind of, I don't know, I guess program, keto or carnivore, or, that kind of?
Yeah, carnivore kind of diet, high protein. I get my carbs from vegetables.
Yeah.
Being Asian, I like rice, so I had to carve that out. Around my mid-40s, I realized that, my metabolism was slowing down, so I had to start changing the diet. The discipline, slowly kicks in, and so majority of my diet is high protein, vegetables.
Yeah.
Weight training later on that afternoon. I used to try to tie it in together, but I feel like I'm robbing from one or the other because, my training regimen can literally last for 3 to 4 hours, and I have to get to work. So cardio in the morning, weight training, at night I split that, and it's been working.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I guess we talked about the morning routine. Talked a little bit before we started recording about your favorite quote. Is the quote on your coin your favorite quote, or is there one that stands above that as being?
I would say that's one of my favorite quotes.
Yeah.
And that quote is, a journey of 1,000 miles began with a single step. And where that quote came from was from Lao Tzu. So he was the founder of Taoism. And Taoism, it means to live in harmony with the universe. The universe has a frequency. It has, and I say the frequency is love. And how do you live in harmony with that? Because we, as human beings, I don't feel like we do.
Right.
We're very destructive. We don't know how to live with that energy. But the journey of 1,000 miles began with a single step is because we take that first step throughout the phases and the evolution of our lives. Like what led me to be that warrior, it was that first step. Right. And before that first step is taken, there has to be like, course of action development there. What drives you to bring you to that situation in life that wants you to take that first step, to be a warrior, to be a scholar. After I got out and I had to transition, I was a drug addict. I lost my way, and I had to take that first step again in healing and walking down that path. First step to be a teacher, because I teach tactics to a lot of law enforcement these days, and what made me take that first step. And I think that's so deep, that message from Lao Tzu, is because there's intention that has to be behind that first step, or you just blindly walk through life.
Yeah. It's interesting that within special operations, I think there's an element of that I think is inherently woven into the psychology of making it through training, whether you even realize it or not. Some people, I think, are very intentional about framing it in that perspective of, in BUDS we would always say one evolution at a time, especially in Hell Week. It's like, don't worry about making it to Friday, it's Sunday night, worry about getting just to the next thing that we're doing, and then the next thing and the next thing. And I think so much of across the spectrum of Department of Defense and in all special operations fields, there's such a big element of that being a kind of a cornerstone principle to being able to make it through training. Or, you're staring at the top of Everest from the bottom and you're like, I can't make it up there. No, but you can make it to the next step, and then
One
the next
step at a
one,
time.
It's, to me, it's fascinating that thousands of years, nothing has changed as far as that mentality towards, tackling super challenging things. The childhood component of your story is immense, and I'd love to get into, from birth to the first years, coming here and walking through that whole compilation of experiences that you had that really shaped who you are now and who you've turned into.
So I was born coat cement floor in Saigon in the bottom basement of a hospital. And the reason why was we're getting artillery by the North Vietnamese that morning. At that stage of the war, the American troops have left Vietnam, and the South Vietnamese and the North Vietnamese are fighting in the Civil War. North Vietnam was more of, they're more of a communist ideal. Russian, Chinese influence and backed by them. And then you had the South Vietnamese that was more, supported by the Americans. But at this stage, the Vietnam War was not a popular war in America. And I feel like the reason why is because that was the first time they allowed, the news reporters to actually get on the ground and get visual. Up into all the other wars, it was, propaganda, it was, scrutinized on what was going to be viewed by the public, but no censored. People are dying, burning, genocide. So I was born in that insurgency. My mother shielded my body from incoming artillery fire that morning. Wow. December 74 was when I was born. April 75 was when Vietnam fell to the North Vietnamese. So I had a few months of freedom, a few months of my country before we lost our freedoms. We lived underneath communist oppression, heavy taxes, curfew. What the North Vietnamese were scared of was an insurgency rise up against the new regime. So they rounded up anybody who was in military or political power, and they brought them out to the re-education camps. So these were torture camps. They were forced into harsh manual labor, malnourished. My uncles were part of the re-education camps. Some of my uncles served in the Navy, Vietnamese Navy. One of them was an officer, and he was put in these re-education camps. Later on, I was reunited with him when I was in junior high, and he was a changed man, like just shadow of who he was. They broke him, skinned the bottom of his foot from him trying to escape, beat him. He barely survived. Re-indoctrinated him to a communist ideal was what they're trying to do. Any person who fell sick or injured in these camps were brought out to the rice paddies and murdered. So we lived underneath communist oppression till I was 3. And my grandfather, he funded the escape. So the escape was, at that time, people were walking out of Vietnam to neighboring countries like Thailand, Cambodia. And these jungles were literally riddled with landmines. The Americans during the war have dropped landmines throughout the jungles, rice paddies. So, people were dying trying to walk out. And the North Vietnamese were capturing and bringing them to the re-education camps. Some left on government planes during the American withdrawal. For me and my family, we escaped on a wooden fishing boat.
Wow.
Right, so about 70 people would fit on this boat, but that night it was over 100 refugees. They took out, it was a fishing boat, so they took out a lot of the water, the food, because it was going to be a short trip to Malaysia. It was a 2-day trip to go to Malaysia. To escape Vietnam, you had to get past the military guards that were patrolling the coast for fleeing refugees. Any refugees that caught were brought out to the re-education camps, families separated. Next were the pirates from surrounding countries of Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia. These criminals would forcibly stop these boats, and because they knew the refugees were fleeing with everything they had on them. And what we usually had on us was we escaped with gold bars. So my grandfather had to pay for us to get a slot on that boat. For an adult, it was 12 gold bars. And these are paper thin gold, but those are bars, and 12 gold bars for an adult and 6 gold bars for a child. I was 3 at the time. We loaded up on the boats. The pirates, they were searching. My mother said that the captain of the ship had to cut off the engine, cut off the lights. He was an ex-Navy Vietnamese guy, and we sailed past the pirates. And these pirates, though, they would stop the boats. They'll board these boats and they'll kill the men. They'll rape the women and they'll enslave the children. It was common practice for fleeing refugees to carry poison, in their belongings. If we get caught, if we're stranded at sea, they would poison the kids so they won't die this miserable death. Over 400,000 refugees died at sea.
And that's just at sea, not counting the land movements.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or the re-education camps.
What span of years did this take place? Where
majority was late 70s.
Late 70s. Yeah.
I left around 78.
Did you have siblings that were with you on that boat, or was it just you and your folks?
I had what?
Did you have siblings?
Yes, my brother.
Okay.
My brother, my biological father, and my mother, we were on that boat together.
Yeah.
But I think back to my mom, because she was in her mid-20s,
Wow.
loading up her 2 kids that can barely walk, right, and betting it all on that escape where so many people have died, just for freedom.
Right. So obviously, or I assume you guys made it to Malaysia.
So we did. We made it to Malaysia, where the Malaysian Coast Guard stopped us. My mother said they shot at us. They were not accepting any more refugees. They didn't want anything to do with the war. The refugees that were fleeing, their refugee camps were full. So they roped our boat, and they pulled us back out into the South China Sea, cut the line, shot the motor, and they left us there to die. My mother said we drifted for nearly 30 days. And I want to put you on this because, they took out majority of the food and water. It was a planned 2-day trip. Now we're indefinite, floating out in the South China Sea. A lot of the elderly people died. They just couldn't make the trip. Dehydration, starvation, sickness. So at 3 years old, bodies were being thrown overboard. Survival situation, people were drinking urine, and then my mother said that we drifted. She contemplated on the poison. We were dying, and we got caught up in a huge tropical storm, and that storm washed us further out into the South China Sea, where we were picked up by a Russian supply boat.
Wow.
They were making their way out of Vietnam. They saw us. And they picked us up, took us to the nearest port, which was Indonesia. And they couldn't even dock in Indonesia, so they kicked us out about 500 meters before the dock, and we had to swim in. My mother said that, my biological father strapped us on his back and swam us in to the nearest dock, where they in process to the refugee camps. In these refugee camps, hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese are relocated, in these camps. And I want to tell you, these camps, people were murdered, lack of food, water. So it was definitely a survival situation, even these camps. We stayed in those camps for 1.5 years. Being a refugee, there was you had to get past the policy, the American policy of being a refugee, getting into America. Other countries accepted us, but my mother wanted to go to America. And the reason why was during the Vietnam War, my aunt, my mother's older sister, she met a Special Forces Green Beret. He was a lieutenant on the ODAs. And he was out at one of the G bases, and his camp got overran. The whole team died, and he got stabbed by SKS bayonet. The camp was taken over. They thought everybody was dead, but my uncle, he was alive, right? Wow. He was this Green Beret. So why that mattered was because he was an officer in the U.S. Army. He was able to expedite the paperwork for us to get out of these, refugee camps.
Wow.
And that landed us in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Which would become home for a long time.
Wow, I grew up there.
That's amazing.
Fayetteville, North Carolina, right outside of Fort Bragg. You ever been there?
I have, yeah.
Okay. So Faye-Nam, right?
Yeah,
That's what they call it. Military town. It wasn't so big back then. Now it's a pretty big town. Right outside of Fort Bragg, home of the Special Forces Green Berets. My mother and father, they struggled. They struggled to make it when we were young. Barely spoke the language. Had to start over. They lost literally everything. We lived in a very poor part of town, I was 7 years old when they got divorced. I think that the pressure of a new country, the escape, the trauma, it got to them, so they divorced when I was 7. And my mother eventually remarried to an American Special Forces Green Beret. And he was 20th Group. So he was Reserve Special Forces, and he was a drill sergeant too.
Wow.
So my brother and I, we went from like zero discipline as refugees and to military discipline. American flag in the front yard, PT in the mornings before school, dress codes, curfew, you name it, right? So making our beds where you can bounce a penny off it, So very, very regimented, and I hated it. I was undisciplined. Who's disciplined really ate, right?
Yeah.
Undisciplined. I had a hard time in America at first, and I wanted to put you there because we were refugees, right? Very poor. Before I met my stepfather, and picked on, beat up. Racism was really bad in Fayetteville, just because it's a military town. The Vietnam War was still fresh in everybody's mind. In the 80s, there was a lot of war movies. Remember the Platoon?
Rambo. Yeah.
Right. A lot of those war movies and a lot of racist names were being displayed, right, in these war movies. So those names, I was called by those names in school. Third grade, I was beat up, and called by all racist names. So when I met my stepfather, he gave me this discipline that I never wanted. I hated him for it, But I did it because it was, at that point, it was survival for me. And I would go to school, get beat up, come home, chores, dress code, would go to school, get my clothes ripped, and, just called by many racist names. And the reason why I'm saying that is because that's what led me to the Warrior Code. There was this, so remember the 80s, you had a lot of samurai movies and ninja movies. And
Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee era.
100%, yeah. Right. So I was, had this VHS tape. It was called The Art of Budo. Budo means the way, it was the combat skill of a samurai. The way, right? And I remember popping that in, and I saw these samurais, and they're warriors, and they live by this code called Bushido. And Bushido, translated, means the way of the warrior. It has 7 virtues within Bushido. Compassion, duty, honor, respect, loyalty, justice, and duty. And at that stage of my life, man, I was like getting bullied. I was a refugee. I was not really accepted because of my race. Vietnamese. Vietnam War wasn't popular. And I seen this warrior race. They had this 7 virtues of compassion and duty and honor, and it gave me this. I said, I remember telling myself, I want to be a warrior. I want to be this ninja. I want to be this samurai, right? I want to serve something greater than myself. And I started embracing my stepfather's discipline. He was a warrior, you know, and I remember the discipline he taught us. I started embracing that, and I, you know, grew up in Fayetteville where there was a bunch of other Green Berets. You know, there was, our neighbors were Sante Raiders, you know.
Wow.
One was, his name was Joe Lupiak, and he was a Sante Raider, Blue Boy element. Another one was Mac Vesog that lived next to my grandfather, you know, American flags everywhere. So I grew up around that. I would say that installed that military side of me. I just didn't know if I wanted what I wanted yet, right? So then in the 80s, you know, you get your Navy SEAL movies, your Green Beret movies, Delta Force, and I was like, wow, you know, I want to be I want to be them, right? My teenage years, I would say I wasn't the most disciplined guy. You know, I was very rebellious. You know, I was always looking at the easy way of doing things, even though my dad was, you know, pushing for me to do hard thing. But I think that was my trauma. I didn't believe, you know, nobody knew what trauma was back then, but it started to surface. I started being really rebellious towards him. Ran away from home when I was 16. And, I don't know, tried to live on my own. That wasn't very successful, and I came back home.
Did you stay in the area? Or?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. Hung out with the wrong kids. You know, at 16,
yeah.
What are you going to do, right? Hung out with the wrong kids, really rebellious. My mother came to school one day and asked me to come home. I did. I love my mother. I came home, tried to rebuild some kind of relationship with my stepfather. It was really, you know, we bumped heads a lot. You know, he had that discipline. He wanted me to be something better. I didn't, you know.
Was he physical with you at all?
No.
Yeah.
Never. No. He would punish me through work.
Yeah.
Right, chores. My mother has a beautiful Japanese garden. Right.
Courtesy of you.
Yeah, because they put me to work. But at 16, I knew I wanted to be a Green Beret. Yeah, and the reason why is because, you know, I was born out of insurgency. I was the oppressed. And you know, after sitting with our neighbors and my stepfather and my uncle, I knew the mission of the Green Beret, to free the oppressed. So I felt a drawing to join the military, to go back to these third world countries and to fight for the people like my parents, right? They had to escape these war-torn countries. I wanted to go in, I wanted to fight, I wanted to serve. I wasn't that physical. You know, I wouldn't say I was physically gifted.
Did you play sports at all growing up?
I wrestled,
yeah.
And I did martial arts. I wouldn't say I was the best at it, but I did. And then I wanted to train up for the Special Forces at 16. So I started joining these long distance running teams. I knew my cardio needed to be better, so I did. And I prepped, I trained. And at 18, I enlisted in the military.
Wow.
There was no direct hire into the Special Forces, you know, back in, you know, so I joined in 93. There was no direct hire. You had to be either E5 or 5 years in the military. So I enlisted in the Army, went airborne infantry. I wanted to go back to Fort Bragg, so Fort Bragg, home to 82nd Airborne, 2nd 325, young paratrooper. I remember passing AIT, Airborne School, went to Bragg, and within a month at Bragg, there was our company commander. He jumped us in 18 miles out, Holland drop zone, and we had to force march back.
18 miles?
18 miles. Wow. I was 18, so I never felt that much pain, you know. Heavy ruck, machine guns, you know, and literally running back. It was a forced march. I was the only private that made it through that. I didn't quit, right? So a lot of the new recruits, they were dropping out of that road march. And I was the only one that made it. And I remember getting back. The first sergeant told us to shower up, getting our spit shine boots and uniform. Haven't slept in 48 hours, all right? And they stood us out in formation, and they wanted to talk to all the new recruits. So they pull us into the commander's office, and the commander looked at all of the new recruits and said, "Who wants to go to Ranger School?" I was the only one to say I do. So 48 hours, no sleep, just walked 18 miles with machine guns and everything. I'm blisters all over me. And then they kicked all the privates out, and he smoked me for 6 hours. 6 hours of push-ups, he made me go grab my gear, running around the obstacle course, you know. And then he asked me at the end of the 6 hours, after I vomited all over my body and everything, he said, "Do you still want to go to Ranger School?" I said, "Send me to Ranger School." So they sent me to pre-Ranger, which was down the street. I remember Recondo Road, they dropped us off, and they made us run with the rest of our gear, which is a 2-mile run into the camp. Graduated pre-Ranger, and within 2 months within my unit, I was in Ranger School. Passed Ranger School. That was very hard at 19 years old to pass Ranger School. I would say that was my first gut check. Passed Ranger School, it came back, they promoted me to E4, served a few months, and then E5 right away, so that qualified me for the Special Forces, right?
Did you have any desire at that time to actually go to a battalion, or your heart was set on SF?
I did. I wanted to go to Ranger Battalion, but the Special Forces was pulling me closer, right? I didn't go straight to the Special Forces after I made E5. I went to Amphibious Long Range Reconnaissance Team. So the LURS guys, right? And I went to the Marine Amphibious Reconnaissance School at Fort Story, Virginia. We did an MTT with those guys out there. So I was part of a water team, you know, a WIC team. And I did that for 2 years, went down to JTF 6 missions, supported them, counter-drug missions. And then, so we're doing a ride along with the Border Patrol. And I remember sitting with the Border Patrol, and he pulled over this van. And I was totally content with the LURS teams. I thought that was the coolest thing, you know. He pulled over this van, and he went out, and then he asked me to get out of the car and go with him. We opened up this van, and it was stuffed with women and children in the back of the van. Human smuggling. The smell, the sight brought me back to my childhood. So it was after that trip I needed to free the oppressed. You know, that draw grew stronger, and I applied for the Special Forces at 20. And went through assessment selection. Graduated that, and then went through the Q course. You know.
How, from having gone through both, how do you compare Ranger School and the Q course? I mean, I know they're different, but in terms of general gut check, overall level of difficulty, how would you stack them against each other?
Ranger School, unlike, you know, RIP, right? Ranger School is a leadership school, and they want to see how you perform in different environments in that infantry leadership environment. Back then it was 1 meal a day. You're burning up to 5,000 calories in movement. Maybe 1 hour sleep at night, it depends on, you know, the patrol. That was a gut check. It was a sledgehammer kind of feel. The SFAS, they were looking for the individual skill set. more intellectual. It was because you're going to the A teams, right? And they wanted a team player, so they had, programmed out SFAS a team week, so they wanted the first week was individual week to see if you had what it took, and then you go into, the team week. That was a sledgehammer, very, very real, high nutrition rate. I finished SFAS with stress fracture. Made it. It was, I would say close to 400 candidates started. 87 made it.
Wow.
So high nutrition rate. And then the Q course was a 8-month course, and man, that was a high nutrition rate as well. We had a patrol phase, which is phase 1. I had no problems with that because, I went to Ranger School and I was an infantryman, so I already knew a lot of those SUT tactics. Then you go through your MOS phase, which at that time I was weapons. So I went through the weapons course, and then they culminated with Robin Sage, the unconventional warfare phase. Yeah. Then you had language school, which at that time, I had Vietnamese language, but I tested for French. And the reason why I chose French is because I can go through Southeast Asia in French. I can operate in Europe. I can operate in the Horn of Africa. So I chose that. It was, a diverse language around the world. And once you graduate from that, then you go to SEER school, and, and then you make it to the ODAs.
I assume then that you grew up speaking Vietnamese with your mom.
Yes.
She taught you, or speaking both, I guess, English and Vietnamese. I'm curious, did your stepfather do any shooting or anything that would have prepped you for success in the military? Did he take time to kind of mentor you in that way?
My stepfather?
Yeah.
Yeah, he absolutely did. He taught me that discipline. It wasn't hard for me to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, basic training. It wasn't hard to, situation awareness, to be able, to have that military discipline, to make your bed in the morning. Like a lot of people struggle with that, those basic things. I already had those basic things. I was in ROTC in high school, so I knew a lot of the military history and stuff like that. So I had the military drill and ceremony, the basics, right? And that really helped me during my basic training, So it wasn't that hard of an indoctrination, because I would say at 8 years old, I was already in the military.
Yeah. As far as kind of the one-to-one field craft parallel of shooting any type of Green Beret skill sets, did he work with you on any of that kind of stuff, or did you go in pretty green?
At 9 years old, we're taking apart weapons.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had the M1 Garands, a lot of World War II weapons, the carbines, the 1911s and 1911 A1. So blindfolded, taking it apart, putting it back together blindfolded. He did a POWs test, which consisted of 5 different weapon systems thrown in a pile. You pull out the weapon parts and assemble it. So I had that. Navigation, I knew how to navigate. I was literally, we grew up, the backwoods of Fayetteville, North Carolina, so the training ground of the Green Berets. I was navigating. He taught us the stars and, just tracking and stuff like that. Yeah. And I feel like he was just trying to have father-son time together.
Yeah.
But he was teaching me those skill sets.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. I mean, that's very few, especially in today's day and age, I think young men get that kind of mentorship from their fathers. What did he think of you following kind of in the same footsteps, and did he give you any advice specific to Q course?
No. At that point, when I was joining the military, we were not really on talking terms. I ran away from home, just came back. I was disruptive, and he did tell me at one point. He said, "It's going to be a gut check, and not a lot of people is going to make it. If you want this, then realize that it's a lifestyle. It's not just a career."
Right.
After Ranger School, we bonded a little bit more as I matured through the military. We, learned responsibility. He started getting a little, closer. But yeah, at that point, he wasn't really, it's you got it or you don't,
right. Yeah. So once you make it through Q course, curious what your kind of expectation versus reality showing up to your first ODA team.
So Joe Lupiak, that Sante radar I was talking about, I was in unconventional warfare phase of the Q, and I was going through the mess hall, and I saw Mr. Lupiak, and I sat down and told him, I'm in phase 3, and he said, what group do you want to go to? And I said, first group. So first, how the groups are broken down, each area operations around the world. First group, Southeast Asia. He's the one who did the orders. So I got into Okinawa, Japan. Right. So I went to Okinawa, Japan. And the reason why I wanted to go to Japan was that was where Bushido was found, the samurais. I wanted that culture. I wanted to learn the code of Bushido. I wanted to live it, literally. My first day on the teams, the team just rotated back from Thailand. I remember, all night I was so excited to meet my team, right? And they told me I was going to a CSAR team, Combat Search and Rescue team. Spit shine boots. I shine my boots for hours. Showed up in pressed uniforms, fatigues, and I knocked on the door that morning at 9. They opened the door, looked at me, slammed the door. And they literally made me stand outside all day. It was into, 4:30 that afternoon was when the team sergeant was ready to talk to me. So from 9 to, 16:30, I stood out of the team room at parade rest, just waiting for them to talk to me.
Did they do that to every new guy, or?
I think so.
Yeah.
They don't like cocky guys. You're a sponge at least the first year you're on the team. They want to see if, you're that cool guy or not, right? Are you going to listen? Are you going to be that young team guy that's going to come in and hear what the senior guys had to say and learn from them? Or do you think you know everything? At that point, I didn't know anything, right? They opened up the door, and finally when I came in, I met the team. They told me they didn't trust Charlie.
Well, that's handy. That's what you want to hear, right?
Right. They told me they didn't trust Charlie. And Charlie, not the engineer, explosive expert Charlie, the VC Charlie, right? So they didn't give me the combination to the team room for the first month.
Oh, wow.
Right. And in fact, what I do in the teams for that first month was took out the trash, mop the floors, clean up the team room, and keep your mouth shut.
That seems like going a little past just messing with a new guy, no?
I think I got the special treatment.
Yeah.
Just because I was so junior, I was an E5, and I went straight to Okinawa. So Okinawa is more of E7s, the senior guys are more out there, the SIFT teams are out there. And I went straight there because of a good old boy deal with Mr. Lupiak. So yeah, they gave me that.
Yeah.
All right. And they gave me a tour. I remember one morning they took me on a Zodiac ride, and they was like, we're just going to show you around the island. And they kicked me out a click out, and I had to swim back, But because I never quit, and I was very humble, and look, that team room was the most spotless team room there, right? In fact, I stripped and mopped the floors, and they were not used to seeing all that. And then when they found out who my uncle was, who was, at that point, just MAG commander. So in Thailand, they have a liaisons between the Thai Special Forces and the American. And he took that position as the colonel, and they had to do some counter drug missions in Thailand. He helped out. The colonel helped out. He was my uncle. So, and I don't know. I embraced the team life, but it was. But I was also going to college at that time. I made a promise to my mother that I would graduate college. So I would go to the team room, do my team time, and then I'll bow into the dojo afterwards, learn. At that point, it was Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu for me. UFC started getting pretty popular in late 90s. So those are the two styles that came out. I was really heavy into martial arts at that time. Started deploying with the teams, Thailand, Laos, Korea. North Korea was a threat back then in Southeast Asia because there are no dong missiles and an unstable dictator that was in charge. He's still the same. And they had no dong missiles that could hit America. So we did a lot of FIT operations with the Korean Special Forces, gaining intelligence, getting our foothold in that area. So a lot of that, mountain training, jungle was my expertise. So they sent us into Malaysia. I did Malaysian survival, Malaysian warfare school, learning their tactics, in the jungle, Malaysian tracking school.
How did they compare to the training that you had? Did you find it was commensurate in competency, or did you find that they were above or below, or how did they stack up?
They were really proficient in the jungle. Like, if I walked a click in the jungle, my uniform's torn, bugs all over my face. These guys were stealth in the jungle. They knew the diet to eat. They knew, how to reduce your scent in the jungle, your trace in the jungle. They're very disciplined commandos, train with them. And what I love about Okinawa is that it allowed me to cross-train with different commando forces throughout the region, the Singaporeans, the Korean 707s, the top tier of these countries, all through Southeast Asia. Jungle warfare was my thing. I was really good at it. After about a year on the ODAs, I wanted to try out for the combat dive team. It was right next door to me. I was training out for pre-scuba, and then I was doing really good. The pool events, the endurance was there. I was young, and I wanted to really be a combat diver. I thought it was really cool. But God, had a different plan for me. So I was in Malaysia, training with the commandos. I was that guy who would go to these foreign countries, train not just the commando stuff, but I would do martial arts with the indigenous force too. Stick and knife fighting, Sulat was big in Indonesia. I kicked this guy, this Malaysian. I tried to kick him like a Muay Thai. He checked it and shattered my ankle.
Oh wow!
So that put me out of pre-scuba. So I had this cast on my foot, and then stuck me on these, these extra duties. And so one of the extra duties was I had to carry demolitions to C11 guys, which was the CRIF guys, right? And the CRIF guys in Okinawa, they specialize in direct action FID, counter-terrorists, kicking in doors. And I drove 2 hours to Camp Hansen, dropped off the demo, and I saw them shoot. And that was the first time I kind of seen that level of shooting, that level of proficiency in the home and movement. And I'm like, I want to be a CRIF guy. I want to be a SIFT guy, right? So I went to my sergeant major with a cast, and I said, I want to try out for, the SIFT teams. He allowed me to do it. I was at the flat range with a cast and trash bag over because it's raining on me and learning marksmanship skills, and I passed. I passed pre-Sephardic, and that put me into Sephardic. And, that's at Bragg, the counter-terrorist training, and then that put me back into C11, the SIFT teams. And that's when I started, doing the door kicking, the learning the CQB, cross-training with the Thai Special Forces, the commandos, and I was really into that. Like, that was really cool to me, right? Like, the explosives, that level of training. And then I did my time in the SIFT teams. I did fight on the side in Okinawa. So Okinawa, you had
like professional,
a bunch of fighting tournaments. Like the Okinawans, they had these dojos, and I trained in a lot of these dojos, and that opened me up to that fight world.
Was it mostly kickboxing style fighting, or?
So at that point, the UFC started getting really popular, so it opened up to no holds bar. All right. It started for me in the tough man matches at Camp Foster Marine Base, fighting Marines. What I love about Marines is they love to fight.
Yeah.
And fought them. Thought that was really cool, fighting them. And then there was off-limit bars that you shouldn't go to because, these Marines would go to these off-limit bars and they'll fight Okinawans and they'll get beat, right? So I showed up at these bars and started fighting no holds bar in these matches, and I realized I was making money off the side, off of the fight promoter. And I thought that was really cool. So being able to fight in these no hold bar tough man matches, and then my time was up in Okinawa, and I rotated Fort Lewis, Washington. Mountain team. Didn't like it. Cold weather stuff.
Did you get to go through any valuable or cool, like mountaineering, alpine kind of schools?
I went to winter warfare training in Fairbanks.
Yeah.
30 degree below zero, building a snow cave.
Yeah.
And I realized that's not my thing. Right?
Take me back to the jungle.
Yeah, not my thing. Put me back in the jungle. And then at that point, we were rotating in the Philippines. Philippines was getting really big. Abu Sayyaf, 9/11. I remember 9/11 happened when I was still in Okinawa, and it was a global war on terrorism. So me being out in first group, they pushed me into southern Philippines.
Down in Mindanao.
I was in Zamboanga and Basilan. Basilan Island was where a lot of the fighting was. So Abu Sayyaf was Al Qaeda funded organization. They're more of I would say they're bandits, beheadings, kidnapping, human trafficking, drugs, typical terrorist stuff. We were deployed down into Basilan in Zamboanga area to work with their LRC, which I stood up, and that's their top tier counterterrorist unit. We worked with them, we stood them up, and then we went to Basilan, started doing FIT operations. But I mean, besides the small conflicts, there was an ODA taken out by an IED, a motorcycle IED, helicopter crashing, but majority of the fighting was in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Right, and I wanted to go to Afghanistan. First group wouldn't let me go to Afghanistan, right? Like I even volunteered to be a gate guard, right? And I remember my sergeant major said, "You need to stop it and go to the Philippines." So there was a command sergeant major of first group. His name was Jody, and he came from the unit, Somalia, CAD guy, And he went to first group, did his command time in first group, and he was going to go back. He was leaving first group to take the unit as the command sergeant major.
Wow.
And here I am in Thailand fighting in a Muay Thai match, right?
In a street fighter pit.
Yeah. And I just felt like I had something to prove, man, And I now looking back, it was my trauma. I never felt like I fit in. I wanted to give back to the world what they gave me. I wouldn't even say my commando year. Yeah, I was there to free the oppressed, but I was really there for myself, my traumas, And I didn't know what trauma is back then. I just had a bad attitude, and I wanted to prove myself, in all of the bad outlets, So Jody Nacy went to one of my best friends and said, "Hey, after his Muay Thai match, right, give him my business card and have him call me." So at that point, team guys were getting hurt in these no-hold-bar matches, bar fights, and there was a letter by a 2-star general that said, hey, no team guys are going to be fighting in these matches. I mean, they spend millions of dollars on us, training us, and guys are getting their arm broke, trying to be this UFC fighter,
Yeah.
So I thought that was what the business card was for. So when my friend gave me that, I'm like, oh God, I'm in trouble. That's the command sergeant major first group, And he goes, he wants you to, call him. So I did. And he offered me a job in the unit.
Wow.
He said, hey, T, I'm going to take the unit. I want to offer you a job in selection and training as the unit combatives guy. I say, so what's that entitled? He goes, well, we have unlimited funds, and I want you to get trained by some of the best. You get to go around the United States and train with some of the best and work with squadron guys, and the unit hand-to-hand combat. I said no.
Really?
Yeah. I said no. So I rotated into Zamboanga.
Who says no to that?
Yeah, exactly, right? So I rotated into Zamboanga, and we're working with the FID force. And, I got tired of just, working with FID missions. I wanted a break from being a Green Beret, So I called him back. I said, okay, I'll take the job. So, long to even be in that unit, huge background check at the top secret SCI clearance. And if they want you, they'll make it happen. So they landed a little prop plane in Zamboanga, dirt trail road, picked me up, flew me straight to Fort Bragg. And I had to do the direct support selection, their tryouts. Nothing hard, And I sat at the command board, which all the sergeant majors are there, and they'll pick away at your life, and they're trying to look for the individual, just trying to see if you fit in. Got picked up, and I went to the unit, and that was life-changing. I mean, you're going, I would say, from the special forces to the units is a different life, different security, different level. I would say that are at the NFL level. You see squadron guys that some of the best operators in the world, and here I am fighting with them in the dojo. In between me teaching, squadron sergeant majors would pick me up and say, hey, you want to do a combat rotation? And I do. I did combat rotations with squadron, more of just helping them out on the ground, gunner, containment, But man, firefights every day, Those guys, they get into fights every time, gunfights every day, especially in 04. Rotated back, and I remember the selection and training command sergeant major called me in his office, gave me my Valor Award, said, great job, you did really good in this rotation, but you're fired.
Really?
Yeah, because Jody Nacy was leaving to go, he did his unit time, he was leaving to take up JSOC, and that was only a good boy slot, right? It was actually it was a sergeant major slot within selection and training, because what usually operators, they would do their squadron time and they'll go to selection and training, and that's a sergeant major slot, and then they'll go take a troop. And here I am, E7, taking up a slot that was created by, a good boy network. He said, you go find a job or I'll find one for you. So I'm like, roger that. So I went down the hall. And when I was rotating through working with Squadron, there was G Squadron. G Squadron at that time, it's very hush, not a lot of people know about G Squadron.
Is that like Black Squadron in Team 6?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Low vis. At that point, my first rotation, I started seeing the shift in the war. Like we used to, the operators would go off of HUMIT intelligence, and that's working with the indigenous forces. And I knew as a Green Beret, like HUMIT's 50-50. Like A lot of these guys are liars anyways, They're hitting dry hole after dry hole. In fact, we were having block clearing parties. Like they'll hit a whole neighborhood to try to find that one. Not very successful, in the beginning of the war. And then we got with NSA, and that's when we started narrowing down the technologies piece. And then it became from 50-50 to 99% hit rate, right? And work with the agency, and then they had DF Orange.
So you were able to go from the combatives guy at the unit to G Squadron at the unit?
Not right away.
Okay.
So I'm still wandering in the hallway, right?
Okay.
And I wandered into the G Squadron wing. And I remember knocking on the door and going to their technical recce, because that's where the success rate came out of. Like we're targeting their technology, their infrastructure, and I thought that was really cool. Like going from a 50% hit rate to 99% hit rate for these squadron guys, all the way down to the room and where they're located in the house. Like we can call it from the outside. And I was kind of playing around with it, even as a combatives guy, because I would volunteer for everything. Gunner, you need me on that device, I'll do it. I'll DF it, for you. And that really put me on the ground. I just wanted combat time. So I knocked on the door, G Squadron, technical recce. Based off my Green Beret experience, they gave me a shot.
Wow.
8-month pipeline.
I mean, that's incredible, just the fact that you're able to do that, because it's such a specialized position and such a hard building to get into, but that foot in the door, that, the good old boy network, as you mentioned, such a valuable component. I am curious, before you get into that chapter, was there any part of you, going from being a Green Beret to being a gunner, 4 squadrons on deployment? Number one, like, did you see a very visible difference in watching these guys operate when you're a gunner for them, where you're just like, dude, this is at such a different level when they're on the ground? And was there any part of you that considered actually trying to go through the actual unit selection to go through OTC at that time? Was that part of the decision-making process?
Absolutely. Like, I wanted to be a unit operator. That's always the pinnacle of every Green Beret or regimental ranger guy. But like I said, God had me on a different path. Like if I wasn't, picked to be that combatives guy, I wouldn't have saw G Squadron at that level. And to tell you, like, squadron versus Green Berets or Rangers, the squadron guys, they are the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean, gunfights played out daily, and you can hear their brevities on comms. It's just like we're having a conversation right now. Literally, they're getting shot at, and you can hear them calm and collective. No cuss words. No. They're so calm, and the speed they hit a target at, it's amazing.
It's interesting you mentioned the cussing thing. Kyle Morgan was just on.
Yeah.
He said the same thing. That really was one of the. I may have even asked him what surprised you the most, and I could be mistaken, but that was for sure an answer or a statement that he made, was that he was really blown away by the professionalism of just how calm and like, I don't know if it was a squadron or a troop sergeant major or somebody high up basically pulled him aside and said, hey, we don't talk that way here. Like, we're professionals, we're grown men, act like it, kind of thing, and almost had a bit of a come to Jesus with him about how he was conducting himself. And I just thought that was really neat, It's something that I've experienced here kind of similarly, coming back to faith, not to get too off in the weeds, but I think it's always appropriate to bring it up and important. Within the last year, I've had kind of that, rebirth, if you want to call it, because I grew up pretty staunch Lutheran community and went to church a lot, but it was more of a tradition, I think, than it was what I actually felt and thought. But I remember, having done this show for a little over 8 years now, in the first majority of it, the first 6 or 7 years of it, the way that I would talk, like I watch old episodes and I'm embarrassed, frankly, at seeing how I talked and how I conducted myself, and it just makes me cringe. And I just never, I always scoffed at kind of the optics and not even the optics, but I think the emotion and the intent behind how you speak is so important. I still, catch myself now and again, but it's just, I don't know, that stuck out to me when you mentioned that, because that was something that he brought up here recently too. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to bring that up. But
No, all good. Yeah, I totally agree. You get on a radio, and if you start cussing, that's going to raise the anxieties of everybody else. It changes the whole op tempo.
Yeah.
These guys were so collective, and the speed they would hit things at, it was just amazing. I had a level of training being on, the CRIF teams in Okinawa, and I did it for a good 6 years. By the time I hit Squadron, the G Squadron, but seeing these guys, that they're a whole different level, and they do it over and over and over. And the thing about the unit is, being in the special forces, you still have obligations that you still have to fulfill through, the post cleanups and these guys don't have any of that. It's just mission driven, and they learn from their past experience. I remember sitting in so many AARs from past, experience, guys getting in gunfights, coming back and debriefing so they can be better, G Squadron was different because we're a low vis squadron, civilian clothes, your demeanor changes. You have to act more civilian. There was a pipeline I had to go through. We had to travel in different aliases, so building those aliases, have the cover shop, working in these business for your cover, right? You had to build that cover.
And I imagine nationality-wise, you're a great fit for that too, right?
That's why, they felt like I was a good choice for that, because even in first group, I was working with ASOT guys, handlers, and because I was able to blend in Southeast Asia, I would do black acts for them.
Yeah, because me there versus you there is a pretty big difference.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Learning how to travel in alias, working in alias, working in these non-declared war zones, embassies, CIA, a lot of technology piece, so going from kicking in the door to now learning, okay, this is how the cell phone infrastructure works. This is how MAC addresses identify into a router, so all these stuff in technology and infrastructure. So if I go into a country X, I learn how they communicate through whatever technology. It can be CDMA, GSM technology, what satellite orbits around that continent of the world. How can I communicate to higher through Iridium, GSM, whatever, right? So learning all that technology, man, it was huge, right? It was hard, and it was a high nutrition rate there.
This is what, 05, 06 time frame?
06. 06. Mm-hmm. 06. And the war in Iraq was getting heavy. So we had to go after their technology. The squadron guys usually mooge up, they make up, and they'll go out and do recce, but a lot of those guys were getting killed doing that, So how does a 220-pound gringo, go into country X and find fix that location to put in that kill ability? So I was learning that, right? And I did it. So after I went through the 8-month pipeline, they brought me back into Iraq, and General McChrystal, he was really big in technology, like employment technology, because he saw the success rate there. We were working with T2 SAS at that time. Team 6 was in Afghanistan. We were in Iraq. TF Orange was out there doing their agency stuff, NSA. So that's the level I was working with, And then a lot of green. I was green side recce. So going into denied areas, digging a hole, installing a camera that connects to Ibogaine, hitting the satellite, and guys are pulling that imagery from anywhere in the world, That was hard. That technology was there, putting stay-behind devices, beaconing operations, understanding pattern of life, when to hit them, And then I was selected after, I would say 4 years of doing that, I was selected for special activities. So that's moving into a different portion of G Squadron, working with interagency, led by unit operators, very seasoned guys. We realized at one point that the war was outside of the combat zones. So we had to find, fix, kill them outside of the combat zones, Yemen, areas outside there that they're still getting funded. So I went through 6 months of special activities training. A lot of how to work in the embassies, etiquette, get a bunch of knuckle draggers, learning how to eat, right? Wearing suits, understanding dynamics of the agency, because you're going to be working with the chief of station. How can you get equipment in to these denied areas?
How to not look like a caveman.
How to not look like a caveman, right? So a lot of those etiquette classes, dress classes, cover. You had to, build your cover, because if you're Mike so-and-so and you're an operator or a G Squadron guy, and you're working for a commercial, company at the embassy, you have to know how your office looks like. You have the credit cards already developed. Your apartment that's in that area of the world has to be paid for. Like, it takes a long time to develop these covers, right? And I would say I had 2 covers developed, and then we moved into working with, special activities. There's females operators on the team, very, very fit girls, very smart.
Did you find any hesitation or difficulty in now working with females, having not done that before? Was that any?
I never worked with females before in the Green Berets. When I went to the unit and went to G, that's when I saw the proficiency. If Tu Lam, back when I was on the teams, I was 210-pound, tattooed out. I looked like a team guy. Going into a country of Yemen, you're going to need a female to soften that look, right? And they can get into areas that we can't. They can go into interviews and draw information from sources that we just can't. We look intimidating, So working with them and their level of efficiency, I got a lot of respect for them. I mean, they've been in firefights. They're utilized in the unit. And then also work with squadron operators that, at the recce level, that were handpicked to go to, special activities, to lead that team, and to work with some of those guys in these denied areas. And these areas outside the combat zone, you don't have the assets of a war zone. You don't have the drones, you don't have, the kinetic capabilities that we have in the war zone, the kill, right? You have to work the FID piece, So when I was in Yemen, Team 6 was there, and they were working the FID piece. And I was working in Team Sanaa piece, which with the chief of station operators, and triangulating, working with NSA, and you have to present your course of action to the chief of station, and he's the one who approves it. He's not going to approve it unless you have developed a certain amount of intelligence on it. And being 210-pound guy, like, how can you sit in a box position in a surveillance, in the middle of the city of Sana'a? You stand out. An Asian guy, you'll stand out. Like, what is your cover? And we did. We had covers, but be able to work technology, and be able to find, fix, and locate them without being on the ground, and we got really good at that. And the drones, back then the drones were huge. They're not like these hand-launched drones. Like back then, it was pretty big drones.
Predators and Reapers and.
Yeah, where you had to launch bungee cords, and we would launch drones from the rooftop of hotels, and also getting into that equipment. Like, how are you going to get in this surveillance equipment in a country that doesn't even know you're doing it, So understanding that piece, and that's where the agency, really helped out with that, and with the diplomatic pouches. And so you learn that level of warfare at that strategic level, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. In that time frame, did you do cover operations where you went with a female into these areas?
Absolutely.
Is that weird at all? As I assume that your cover is you guys are a couple. Is that correct? Sometimes we work at that. I don't want to say the name of the company, but there's a commercial company that we have our cover off of, and we work as co-workers there. But yeah, there's a couple. Yeah. Is that awkward at all? Where it's like you've never met this person and now you're training and pretending to be their spouse, and like, is that a hard thing to pull off?
You actually train together. You go through a pipeline of training together. You develop your alias, you develop your cover story. So you already have this literally developed before you even hit country. Years of operational experience.
Yeah. Were you married at the time?
Yes.
Yeah. How do you juggle that? I mean, is that a difficult thing to? My job is to pretend to be married to somebody else, and now we're traveling abroad as.
I would say at that time, didn't really tell my wife too much of G Squadron stuff. I didn't really bring that home. I didn't want her to worry about, all that. So yeah, G Squadron, the unit, was really secret.
Yeah.
In our marriage, I didn't really. And she didn't really care about the military stuff,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. In that training and pipeline, I assume that it adequately prepares you to pull that off in a way that is believable and whatever. Were there any almosts or close calls or anything in that environment where either of you like slipped up and said the wrong thing or did the wrong thing or anything like that?
They did a kinetic in Yemen. And once you hit the target, and then you trickle out right through your rat line or whatever. The cover girlfriend, the cover wife, she rotated back, and she was Asian. And then you see me trickling in a couple days later out of the same country. I remember getting snagged up in D.C. They literally just want to know, like, why are you coming out of Yemen? Right.
So the U.S. government hasn't circumvented that? You have to go through customs the same way everywhere?
It was Department of Homeland Security just got stood up, and they just wanted to question me. It wasn't like, and I remember playing the cover card and everything. It got to the point where they had to call the cover shop, right? So, and it rotated through to the company, and they validated. So it made me realize at that level in the unit, like, how much levels if that unit's there, right? Like, how much support do you need to run, like, for Homeland to call this number, and then it locates you to a cover shop, which they vouch for you working at this place, right?
That's wild, man.
Right. It's really James Bond stuff at that point, right?
Yeah.
And you're driving around these BMWs and these cars that, the whole roof is is antenna, and then you have computers that pull out, and you're playing at that level, and you had to learn, like they sent me to Bosnia to learn a lot of the tradecraft from the unit back when they were hunting down war criminals in Bosnia, in DC area, to cross-train with case officers, former case officers now, teaching you how to, do surveillance detection routes and bumper positions. So, yeah, a lot of tradecraft there.
Yeah. Were during any actual overseas operational stuff, did you have any close calls where you almost got rolled up, or was everything pretty smooth sailing that way?
It was pretty smooth for me. A lot of mission planning, detection routes, and stuff like that. So it was pretty smooth. A lot of stuff I was doing was definitely a no-go in their country. So if you get caught, I remember them saying, you get caught, if you get caught by the wrong people, you're going to be on the news, your head's going to be lopped off, or you get caught by the government, you're going to be put in spy jail. So
you're on your own.
And your QRF is, sometimes a country away.
Yeah. Wow. How long did you said it was 4 years that you spent, and then you went to special activities. How long were you at special activities?
So I spent 3 years there.
3 years.
Yeah.
As that wrapped up, what was kind of the next option for you? Did they say you need to go somewhere else, or did you decide to?
No, I actually got offered the troop sergeant major position there. And the reason why I left was promotion-wise, when you make E8 and you're a 18 series Special Forces, because you're still Special Forces 18 series, even though you're in a unit doing that type of work. I got picked up for 8, and you have a choice, right? So that unit is operator career, For me, I had to go back to the teams and do 2 years of team sergeant time. And then I had a letter of acceptance to go back and pick up the troop to be their troop sergeant major. That was the plan.
Yeah.
I signed the letter to come back, and I went to 10th Group. And the reason why I went to 10th Group is because, Libya, the annex got attacked, and you see the Americans getting drugged out in the streets, and we didn't respond. I felt the way we should have, and the unit got involved in Benghazi, and 10th Group was picking up the AFRICOM piece. So AFRICOM got stood up, and they wanted an action arm for the continent of Africa. All right, in case that happened. The SIFT teams in 10th Group was standing up and the action arm for that. So they wanted to have SIFT guys rotate in to have that FID bilateral capability. And I thought that was a good fit, and I missed the teams at that point. So I did, a lot of surveillance work in the unit, and that gets very lonely, doing that lifestyle. And I miss the ODAs, I missed the A team. So I rotated back. I left the unit after 7 years in the unit, and I rotated back to the group, and I took up 10th Group because they were going into the Horn of Africa. Stood up the recce section, brought in the agency piece that I learned in the unit. But man, I tell you, at that point, I really lost my way. When I left 10th, when I left the unit, started getting into drugs.
On active duty still?
Yeah, painkillers. I caught an IED in 2005. And for my pain, they gave me Oxycontin, and the story on the team. Oh, yeah. So Oxycontin, that's a huge thing, right? Like those opiates. That's one pill leads to another pill, leads to addiction, and that led me down years of addiction. And by the time I hit 10th Group, I was addicted to opiates, and took up team sergeant time and stood up their recce troop, which I brought in the low vis piece. Mike Glover was a part of that. He stood up the the recce piece for that as well. He helped me with that. And, he stood the green side. I stood up the low-vis side. And he went into Libya, and I was the team that, after him, that went into Libya to work with the FID force out there after, hunting down pro-Gaddafi regime, working with the unit in the annex at that point. But man, I was addicted to drugs.
And so this actually started in 05, post IED blast. I assume you sustained significant injuries from that, or what? Can you speak to what they were?
Neck injuries, lower back, spine.
Yeah.
They wanted to fuse my neck at one point. Didn't do it. So I was living with that pain. The opiates, I would say, it got into more of the addiction around 08. I realized the opiates kind of numbed me mentally as well. Lost a few close friends in the unit and also in group at that point. I felt like that numbed it. So yeah, I got really into the drugs, and by the time I hit temp group, I was really addicted.
How, I guess from almost a practical standpoint, being on active duty, and just being able to source them enough to be able to be addicted, like how do you even accomplish that? Running a business means opportunity is always on the line. An unanswered call, a missed text, a follow-up that falls through the cracks, not just a missed lead, that's money you already spent to get that person in the door walking right out of it. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the business phone system built so you never miss a call. Quo keeps all your calls, texts, and voicemails in one place. Anybody on your team can pick up a conversation, see the full history, and respond fast. There's no dropped balls. Their built-in AI agent handles after-hour calls, answers questions, and even books appointments. So you're covered even when your team is offline. It's rated number 1 on G2, trusted by over 90,000 businesses, and it sets up in minutes on any device. Keep your existing number, add teammates as you grow. There's no IT headaches, no hassle. Money's on the line. Always say hello with Quo. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/micdrop. That's quo.com/micdrop. We're heading into summer, but the economic pressure isn't letting up for most families. Inflation is still grinding on everyday costs, groceries, gas, everything. And what ends up happening is people start leaning on credit cards just to keep up. High interest debt starts stacking up, and suddenly that financial cushion you worked hard to build starts disappearing. Here's what a lot of homeowners don't realize, though. You've probably got more equity sitting in your home than you think, and that equity can actually be the weapon you use to fight back. American Financing is helping families get out of that high interest trap right now. They have salary-based mortgage consultants, not commission-driven salespeople pushing you into something that doesn't make sense. With mortgage rates in the 5s, their customers are saving on average $800 a month by using their home equity to wipe out high-interest debt. $800 a month back in your pocket is real money in an economy like this. There's no upfront fees, no pressure, and if you start today, you could delay 2 mortgage payments. Call American Financing today, 866-891-3262. That's 866-891-3262 or americanfinancing.net/micdrop.
So when you have a skill set that the military needs...
So Uncle Sam taught you how to do it.
Yeah, well, if you have a skill set the military needs, and they really need you downrange, the doctor's going to give you whatever it takes to keep you in that game.
Yeah.
So I can ask for 150 opiates, and they're going to give you that.
Wow.
Right. And I would say at that point, the military, the Army didn't realize the addiction the teams had on opiates. Whatever I wanted, I got, literally, and I can walk into, the flight surgeon's office, I want this, and they'll give it to you because they want you downrange, That did affect me. That affected me performance-wise. I was just looking for the next high, you know, at a certain point. And anytime something happens, I just want to numb it, you know. I did realize at a certain point it started becoming an issue. You know, my performance started dropping. I was a big-time martial artist. I fought the majority of my life, and I would use those skill sets on combative days to hurt my teammates. You know, I wanted to hurt the people around me. And it started with the teams. My marriage was starting to fall apart. 10th group at that point was really heavy in the Horn of Africa. The SIFT teams were going into, like I say, Libya. I was fighting counter-poaching campaigns in Cameroon, rotated out, protected our former president in South Africa when Mandela's funeral. Yeah, just really lost my way, man. Like, you know, wasn't that great of a leader anymore. I didn't even want to be on the teams anymore, but didn't want to get out either, you know, just holding up that slot, you know. And
at what point did you realize that it was a problem?
I would say, so I did from 2012 to 2016. 2016 when I got out, and that's my 10th group years. Around 2014 was when I'm you know, I'm a shadow of who I was.
12 to 16 was 10th group, or 16 and beyond was 10th group?
No, 12 to 16.
Okay.
Yeah.
So halfway through there is when you kind of realized.
Yeah, I mean, I was the rock star. You know, when I first came, Glover was too. He came from the unit, I did too, and we were the rock stars. We had the technology, we had the latest in warfare that 10th Group wanted. But for me, you know, 2 years into it, you know, I kind of lost my way. And like I said, I was a team sergeant, so I have these brutal team sergeant days where, you know, we'll jump in and we'll run back full kit. You know, guys that fall out, I'll beat them up on combatives days, and just horrible human being, you know. I wouldn't say I had God at that point. I was so far. I never really believed in it. I knew there was a higher thing, but, you know, I never believed in it. Marriage falling apart, barely holding it together. I was lost, you know. 2016 was when I got out. TBI. Had a tumor in my frontal lobe of my brain from the IED. My back's jacked, you know, just physically I wasn't there anymore. I couldn't do it anymore. And medically retired out at a wounded transitional unit. Very shameful, I felt, you know, like I retired out of some basketball court, you know, and when you played on the teams at that level, and to retire out in some basketball court with some E4 giving you a retirement paper and good luck, you know, kind of deal. VA, I wouldn't say really helped me. I was actually told by a doctor at VA that I had 5 years to probably live before I commit suicide.
Who says that?
Right? Yeah.
He said that to you?
Yeah, he did. At that time, high suicide rates among the teams. He literally looked over my military record, threw it on the desk, and he said, "I'll give you 5 years."
I mean, how bitter do you have to be in your job to, even if you're thinking that, to actually say that to somebody? Like, that's baffling. This was a VA guy or an active duty guy?
He was a VA guy. Yeah. And he said, hopefully you don't need to use the VA, you know. And I remember the day that I received my retirement papers. I was on terminal leave, you know. They gave me my retirement paper, and so in the unit, I made E9. So I don't know, you know how it works, but you know, you have your big military promotion, and then you had like special mission units. They have a different promotion program, and you fall underneath. So I actually made E9, but I couldn't physically do it anymore. And so I, you know, through the military, because you can't, they're mandatory retiring you through medical. they allow you to retain that rank. You never served that rank, but you retain that rank. So, medically, I retired as an E9, but I never did. I never served as E9. I never went to the Sergeant Major's Academy, but I retired. Nothing special there, but when I got out, I felt humiliated. I remember driving home, and, I have medals stacked to my shoulders, and I ripped off my uniform in the garage, down to butt-ass naked, threw the uniform in the corner of that garage, and I just felt, worthless.
Why?
I mean, you retired out, the way I did, and to work where and also I was a drug addict, and I was, everything was falling apart in my life, So, no purpose, no direction. What are you going to do? You're good at one thing, right? One thing, which is war. And I couldn't free the oppressed anymore. I had no purpose in my life, I went into a state of depression for 3 months. My wife was working up in Denver at that time. She's working in the corporate world, and I would literally sleep all day in a dark room. If I was to get up, I'll go to the couch and stare at a TV that's off, replaying the voices in my head, popping a pill, trying to numb it. And you ever got to that point where, you look at yourself in the mirror and you hate yourself?
I mean, thankfully I haven't. I've had a number of guys that have had obviously all the paths are different, but similar kind of rock bottom moments. But thank God I've never been at that point. I've certainly had ups and downs, but nothing like that.
Yeah.
Which I'm very thankful for.
So I looked at that guy, and I'm like, I couldn't even recognize him, and I wanted change. So I had cachet pills all through the house, I remember someone on the couch and cachet everywhere, and secretly taking it behind my wife's back, and she didn't even know. Like, that's how good I was, I hid it from her.
So she had no idea this whole time that you were even on the medication, let alone had a problem with it.
No. I dumped it all down the toilet, and I suffered, from withdrawals. It took me a few months of withdrawals, body aches, vomiting, stomach pains. After those few months, I remember, so I have an office in my house. I walked in my office, and I had a collection of books from all around the world. And someone was drawing me to the office, and I located this book called The Book of Five Rings.
Musashi, right?
Miyamoto Musashi, a Ronin. He wrote that book in 1645 in a Buddhist cave in Kiyomoto, Japan. I picked up that book when I was 12, the first time, tried to read it and didn't understand it. I wanted to be a samurai, I wanted to serve.
Yeah, I imagine at 15 that's way over your head.
Way over your head. And as my life unfolded, I started understanding each teaching, like the teachings of fire, how to meet your enemies without fear, Like, we read that, but to meet your enemies without fear, you first have to be scared, right? And combat taught me, like, okay, I have to be afraid to know how to substitute that feeling of survival with something that's greater than myself. Water to be fluid in every facet of your life, to take that first step again when it's necessary. Lao Tzu, So I opened up the Book of Five Rings. I remember why I wanted to be a samurai when I was young, and in the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism, a journey of 1,000 miles began with a single step. I lost my way. I remember a monk told me, you lose your way, simply find it again. So I did. I did an azimuth check, and I knew I was good at one thing, which was force multiply, Green Beret, you know. So that's where it started with me. I started traveling across America, teaching. To tell you the truth, I just wanted to give back, to be something familiarized with. Like, I'm good at war, I'm good at teaching, I'm good at, you know, force multiplying. So I started teaching. I started teaching law enforcement. I started law-abiding citizens that can better protect their families. And that led me down, you know, teaching law enforcement, because once law enforcement know your background, they're going to want you, you know. So I started teaching law enforcement, and God put me there really fast. Like, he made me really successful really fast. When I say that is, during the war, I was that guy who, when equipment breaks, you know, body armor is going to always fall apart on you. Equipment is going to fall on you. I mean, we're doing direct action missions, you're climbing walls, you're free falling, like, your equipment's going to fail on you. So I was that guy that had, you know, learned these high industrial sewing machines. I would learn how to sew with the riggers, you know, the parachute guys, and that allowed me to fix my equipment. And I had ideas that I could make equipment better. So I designed ideas and I made it into reality, and that really made us very successful. I designed the Ronin gun belts, the plate carriers, you know, just redesigning stuff that made us more stealthful and, you know, better in combat, and that really got picked up. Government contracts, you know, and that put me in a very financial, successful place, you know. But I would tell you, Mike, I was still hurting within, you know, like I never lived in any of that success. You know, I traveled across America, I would teach, and at that point, you know, I would, I remember I had an SLR camera, and I would set up the aperture, shutter speed, and the ISO, and I would give it to my wife, and she'll record me teaching. And through reconnaissance work in the past, I knew how to post-edit using Adobe Premiere and stuff like that. So I would post that on YouTube, me teaching. And along with me teaching, you know, I was in the Philippines. I had to learn, you know, stick and knife fighting and disarming a guy, you know, with blades. And I was really proficient at blades, just because I worked with the Filipinos and they were really good at that. So I started teaching blade tactics and martial arts, and I'll post that on YouTube. And I remember the History Channel emailed me, and they asked me if I wanted to be on a TV show called Forged in Fire, Knife or Death. You know, at that stage of my life, you know, I wanted to just do as much as I can and try new things. I want to have a better experience in life, you know. So I interviewed for Forged in Fire, Knife or Death, and the host was Bill Goldberg, you know, the WWE wrestler, you know, and him and we hit it off. I was the co-host of that show, and we did 3 seasons of that. I'll tell you, you know, being a special operations guys, we're not used to being in front of the camera. I'm sure you know that.
Yeah.
Like, our life is so secret, you know. And then now I have 15 cameras placed in front of me. You know, my face is on 15 different countries, you know, around the world, and it was a good experience. It allowed me to not be camera shy. And I would post my fighting, my training online, and then I got an email from Infinity Ward, Call of Duty, asking if I'd be interested in doing motion capture for them. I turned it down.
Really?
I just didn't want to be in that suit doing motion capture for you. Like, why? What benefits does that have out of me, you know? And my wife said, hey, you should give it a try, you know, at least go there and talk to them. So we did. We flew to Hollywood. They interviewed me, saw my moves, said, hey, we really want your movements. And then my wife, being the business person she is, she said, do you want Ronin And they're like, yeah, Tu Lam, Ronin, yeah, we want him. And then the president of Infinity Ward said, how can we get you on? So we signed a contract. They literally took my character, who I am, my likeness, my logos, my business logos, the Ronin Dragon, and put it on my character. And they screened me in. I did motion capture, and I was on Modern Warfare Season 3 as just a downloadable character. It's nothing big. But I became the most downloadable character in the history of Call of Duty, is what they told me, right? They're like, you're the most downloadable character. And they had to pay to download me. I wasn't free. I don't know. It was because I was ex-Special Forces or, but that's where God had it, And then I found myself in the spotlight. The little bit of fame, I guess you could say, more people started following me. I felt like my message had to change. I had kids following me now. So what I said I had to do. And at that point, I was really hurting. Like all this success, all this fame, all this money. I was driving cars that I never thought, I lived in a house I never thought I would ever can afford. Marriage now, I'm great. But inside, I was hurting in my heart.
Right, so I see a recurring theme with, different points of your life. For a lot of people, I think it's situation or circumstance tends to dictate high, low, etc. But for you, it's really, even at the highest points you can be in the military, you felt like you were in a bad spot or were in a bad spot. The understandable transition out and feeling disappointed in how you retired and the fact that you retired, that's an understandable spot. But then kind of all things professional, you make this sweeping arc back to the top, but still just don't feel whole or like yourself, and as you put it, still in a really bad spot. Can you speak to what that was like, or what it actually means for you at that time to be in a bad spot?
There's a certain point, in the veteran space, you become an influencer, and a lot of people is hanging on your words. And, even though I was talking, at that point in my life, I was, very Taoist, Confucius in my beliefs. That means the universe, and don't let the circumstances affect you. And, it was all a lie, because inside I was a mess. I was a mess. In fact, a lot of these law enforcement officers, they started looking up to me. Even, I'm speaking at high schools and elementary schools now because I'm this Call of Duty character. In fact, my character was so popular that they called me back and they put me on the cover of Call of Duty.
Wow.
And I did a few months of motion capture for the development of Modern Warfare 2. So I started getting really heavy into Infinity Ward, and that relationship. And that opened me up to the world. It's the most popular video game franchise, I would say, in the world, Call of Duty. I mean, I remember team guys playing Call of Duty when we were overseas,
Yeah.
We would go hit a target and come back and they'll play Call of Duty, So that was a big influence around the world, but inside I was dying. I felt like I was carrying more weight, and the more successful I got, and the more weight I was carrying, and the more lie that I felt. Like, I'm this image of this warrior, this image of very successful entrepreneur leader, but inside I really wasn't. I was barely holding it together.
Was there any other aspect of, did you ever go back to pain medication or have any slip-ups or any other type of substance issues during that period?
Cannabis.
Yeah.
Is legal in Colorado. When I got off of the opiates, I used cannabis to kind of fill that spot. but it got out of hand at a certain point. You know, like you can use, I feel like you can use that organic drug to bring you to a place that can connect you, but that overuse of it can really destroy you. And at a certain point, I was overusing it, right? The pain I was carrying inside, the weight I was carrying, I felt like I needed to mask that pain, you know, and all I knew is how to mask pain because of the opiate years, you know. Because, you know, the opiate years, addiction years, I was still operational. I was performing at the top tier. You know, government agencies were picking me by name, and I was a druggie. So we're really good at wearing different masks, you know?
Mm-hmm. I mean, especially when your job is that, right? I mean...
Mm-hmm. I think what really kind of broke it was I was standing in front of 2,000 counter-narcotics officers, and I was speaking on leadership, and I wasn't any of it. And here they are, they're cheering me on, and they're looking at me with, you're it, right? But I'm not it. And standing in front of the kids and talking about being this, but I'm not any of it. I'm a lie. The fame kept on coming, success. You know, we went to Kumamoto, Japan. So I went to, my wife did a trip to Japan. And I was a mess, you know, and I visited the cave of Miyamoto Musashi. I went to Kumamoto, the same cave that he wrote the Book of Five Rings in. At that point in my life, you know, I was really big in meditation. Like, I was very thallus, you know, really big in meditation. I knew how to empty emotion, thoughts. But there was always a intrusive thought that would come in my mind, and it was nasty. Just nasty thoughts, you know. It could be lustful thoughts, it could be sinful thoughts, addiction thoughts, thoughts of murder, you know, thoughts of hurting people. It just comes, and I can't control it, you know. And I would say that that's why I did drugs, because I didn't want to hear it anymore, you know.
Did you stick with just cannabis?
At that point, yeah.
And leading up to that, I mean, you mentioned a couple of times in these speaking engagements and seminars or trainings that you're putting on where you felt like you were alive. I guess... What is it about how you were living that felt like you weren't actually living what you were speaking?
Now looking back, I didn't have God. See, you know, we can live from all the things in this world, all the temporary pleasures and the success, all of it's temporary. Everything in this world is temporary. The conditions, I was chasing the temporary, and I didn't have God, you know. When I went to Kumamoto, Japan, I sat in that cave, and, you know, sometimes when we think we hear, like, you think it's a thought that comes in your mind and comes in your voice, so you think it's you. But what I found in that cave was that I needed to change. I needed to be that samurai that I wanted to be as a child. I needed to go back and teach the next generation of warriors. So when I came back, my teaching philosophy changed. It was more service, humanity driven. Budo, I'll teach you the way of killing, but it needs to be guided by compassion. The sword is lethal, but it's the guy who wields the sword and the purpose behind it. So that's what came out of Japan, right? And I came back, I changed my curriculum to more of that, you know, compassion, duty, but I was still suffering. The fame, success led me to Sean Ryan. And him and I, we hit it off, you know, but there was still something empty in me. And I remember Sean, you know, him and I became friends, and we're still friends to this day. And He shared a lot of personal things with me, and he just went down to Mexico for the vets program, you know. Changed man when he came back. 90-day difference, you know. So I asked him, you know, what happened? And he said, you know, vets program, Marcus and Amber Capone sponsors this foundation to help veterans through psychedelics, and you should go. So I did. I applied for the program. Me being who I was, they put me in front of the line. Never done psychedelics. Don't even know what that is. And you know, at that point in my life, I'm not a believer.
Were you at all growing up? I mean, were you exposed to it?
I didn't have that.
Yeah.
You know, my mother's Buddhist, and she very ancestral. You know, worshiping ancestors. I'll seek the ancestors for this. My stepfather wasn't that. He is now, but he wasn't that back in the day. You know, so I didn't grow up to that. I would say I was very lost spiritually. You know, at that point in my life, I had all the things of this world, but I was spiritually bankrupt. So I went down to Mexico, and I, 2 other SEALs was with me, a special operations group. Marcus Capone, you know, SEAL Team 6 guy, you know, he went down there, really changed him, and he realized guys like us, we need an awakening. And it's hard to shake one of us because we don't get easily rattled, you know, and it takes a bit to wake us up, to interrupt the pattern, I would say, you know. Mm-hmm. We live in our own ego, our own things of this world, our drives, you know, like we're willing to die for what we believe, you know, special operations guys. So he needed something that was going to wake us up, you know, hit us hard. And it did, right? So 2 Navy SEALs, amputee Marine, and a NFL player did a full career TBI. All of us have anger issues. Went into Mexico, looked like a CIA safe house, you know, on the beach. A lot of breath work. They brought in coaches to teach us how to breathe through this medicine that we're about to take. Shamans, healers. There was this guy named Trevor. He was I would say he's the medicine provider. You know, that night we had to write our intentions. You know, and really I wrote down, I just want to be a better human being. I want to be a better husband. So we're standing by this burn pit, you know, and overlooking the ocean. The sun is literally coming down, and the SEALs said their things, I said mine, and we burn our intentions in the fire, and then they give us the pills, you know. It's Ibogaine from the boga root in Africa. I took 5 pills based off your body weight, you know. Okay. They go off your body weight. So I took 5 pills of that. And then they say, hey, if you're starting to feel kind of queasy, you need to run up to the meditation rooms, which it was upstairs. It had a mirror and meditation mat, and they had all the mats laid out for each one of us. And that's where we're going to go do battle, right? One SEAL, I mean, he showed him a full, like, cry uniform, like he was ready to go battle. He was going to war, you know. I showed him my pajamas, you know, and
full samurai gear.
Full samurai gear. And I remember feeling really nauseous, and I sat in front of the mirror, and I looked at the mirror, and you had to look at the mirror, and the SEALs started shaking this, you know, the Mexican seed things.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's called, but it has dried seeds, and then you shake.
And that. Yeah, I know what you mean.
You know what I'm talking about, right? So they started shaking the rhythm. So I felt the war rhythm coming in, so I picked it up and I joined in, and then I started seeing my face warp. So I knew I was about to transition, right? So really nauseous for me. I fell back into the meditation mat. They put on the eye mask, and if you open your eyes through the eye mask, you're in this world. That was really hard for me. Like 16 hours I was in it.
Wow. Does it feel like 16 hours?
Oh yeah.
Or does it feel even longer than that?
You feel longer. Yeah. The SEALs had visuals. I wouldn't say I had visuals, but I did see things, but I couldn't make sense of it. Like the first thing I saw, I was in a hole, and I saw this cloth that covered the hole, and literally I was trying to look past the cloth, but you can only see it through your peripheral. If you stare at it, it goes away. Right. I didn't make sense of that. And then it was like, if you think about it, it's like the Riddler. It gives you like a riddle, and you guess the riddle, brings you to the next stage. So I'm in this hole, and I remember cursing at the hole. And if you look through the cloth, it looks like literally looked like Africa. But it was crystal clear. This is a 3D world. That's 6D. That world is more real than this world. And then finally, I remember cursing at it, and I said, what the F you want from me? And it brought me into an elevator shaft, and I'm looking up, and it had esco barriers, rebar, barbed wire, and it told me to climb out. I couldn't climb out. For hours I tried to climb out. I couldn't climb out, and then I said, I'm trapped, and it brought me to the next thing. So if you guess it right, it brings you to the next thing, And like I said, it wasn't like, I wouldn't say it was visual where there was a guy that showed up and it brought you around and trying to teach you. Like one of the SEALs, he had a guide show up and carried him around the spiritual world, right? For me, it was just images. And if I guessed it right, or if I say something, it'll bring me to the next thing. 16 hours of that, 16 hours of anxieties, 16 hours of almost like a child scared, like a 3-year-old child being scared. I realize what it is now. It was, so the medicine restricts the frontal lobe. So blood flows from your frontal lobe to your rear lobe, and every day you think the same thoughts, same emotion. It's actually wired in your nervous system. A lot of the traumas that we can't even remember through our analytical mind is wired into our nervous system. So if you're a 3-year-old child stuck on a boat and people are dying around you, that's literally wired to your nervous system. So even if you're, this successful adult living in this celebrity lifestyle, you're still wired to that nervous system,
Did you see any visions of your childhood that you didn't remember?
I saw, I heard crying, like muffling and crying, like, and squeaking like you're on a boat, but it was dark. Yeah. I couldn't see anything, and I heard just, elderly people crying. 16 hours of that, and then I felt like the war stuff started surfacing. So a lot of childhood stuff in the beginning, and then the war stuff, palm groves, gunfights in the palm groves, gunfights in urban warfare. Guys that I put down, they're I didn't see their face, but they would show up in thoughts. And what I took out of it was, when I was in war, I used to think the enemy's lesser than me. You have to kill them. But when I was there in that space, I felt they were human too. And they're a child of God, even though I didn't know what God was, So they played this African music, you know, and that got on my nerves, the African music, and it's just a bunch of instruments that you don't even understand, and it sounds like a buzzing noise around you. It's just really irritating. 16 hours of that.
And it's like super erratic too, right?
Yeah,
like
just
it's not rhythmic very
No.
much. It's kind of all over the place. It's like African jazz.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they had one where, you know, you could hear their footprint, like them stomping around a campfire. So it sounds like you're there because you're in a eye mask, you know. They have EKG, shamans there, doctors. 3:00 was the witching hour. That's when I heard screaming from the SEALs, and that was the hard hour, you know. For me, it was hard hour. That's when I was in the Palm Groves fighting. Gunfights, you know, played out. 6:00 in the morning, you could kind of see the sun coming through your eye patch, you know. So I was aware of what time frame it was, you know, roughly. I remember I'm the one who ripped off everything. I threw it because it didn't work. And the doctor, you know, paramedics came and trying to put it back. You know, like, get off me, right? Bring me to my room. And the walls, I remember when I ripped off my arm, the walls were energy. And they brought me back to my room, and I was worse off than I was ever. You know, like I wanted to end it there. If there was a gun there, I would have, you know, just the emotions, you know, like everything was surfacing, you know. And Trevor came in and asked me how I'm doing. I said, I feel like shit, you know, this thing didn't work. And then he's like, well, you know, just you know, to make you feel better, Sean Ryan had a harder time. I'm like, really? So, you know, like it brought me hope, right? Because I saw who he was afterwards, right? I'm like, really? And I couldn't sleep. It was, you know. So they finally put me down with some sleeping pills, and then I woke up the next morning, and it was like a scene out of you know, the Christmas Carol where he wakes up and he's like, it's Christmas, you know, kind of.
Miracle on 34th Street.
No, that guy who had the you know, the ghost of the past, the ghost of the
yeah, Scrooge, the Ebenezer Scrooge.
Thank you. So he wakes up and he's like so grateful for that. So I woke up and I didn't hear the noise, and I was totally present now. You know, like I'd never been that. There's always intrusive thoughts, always noise in the background, always anxieties. It was all gone. And I remember running out into the yard and just falling on the ground in the backyard. The beach is there, crying and touching the ground. Like.
And this was from just sleeping it off after that.
Yeah.
Did you dream at all during that sleep?
No, I was out. And I remember, like, you know, so grateful. And then the sun was, you know, was there, and I was totally present, the birds and the beach. And then the intrusive thought came back. 15 minutes. I had freedom for 15 minutes. Intrusive thoughts came back. And I told Trevor, he said, oh, no problem. We'll flush that out with 5-MeO DMT, which is that toad venom, you know. And that's toxic. That you know, that comes from indigenous frog in Arizona, and it's one of the most poisonous toads. And they piss off this toad, and the toad shoots poison into a glass, and they dry it out in the sun, and they flake it into a crack pipe, and that's what you smoke.
I wonder who figured that out. You know, like how do you stumble on that?
But this is from generations, like
But even, I mean,
years.
somebody had to figure it out, right? Like
some indigenous person figured this out. You know, it's just so they put in a crack pipe, and you know, and you're out on the beach, and then you're supposed to smoke it, and they call it ego death. You know, and you have to surrender to it. And I was the last one in my stick to get chosen, so everybody else went, and then they were having a hard time. In fact, 2 of the SEALs were crawling across the lawn, screaming for their life, saying they saw hell, you know.
that lasts much shorter, correct?
It's it's DMT, so it's a 24-minute ride, but that ride is like a roller coaster. It's fast. It's like jumping off a cliff. You're not going to get back on that cliff. You're going to have to ride it all the way down, right?
Yeah.
I was the last one chosen, and I went out, smoked a crack pipe, count down from 20. I remember around 10, I started seeing black clouds, the hallucination, and I fall back, and the light started coming towards you, right? And you're in eye mask, but the light's coming. You could fight it, deaf, because it feels like you're dying. In your mind, you're physically dying. So DMT at that amount is only produced in the moment of birth and the moment of death at that amount. So you're going to feel what it means to die. Can you imagine like your last breath on this world? Like you're about to leave this world when we're all old men and dying in our beds at the final stage of our life, that last moment. Would you hold on to this world? Would you let it go?
I mean, for me at this point, I would absolutely let it go. Like,
Beautiful.
you know, but a year ago, I wouldn't have been able to confidently
Because of God.
say it. Yeah,
definitely.
100%. Yeah.
So I didn't have God back then, right? Well, he was always on me, right? You could hear through my story. He saved me in the South China Sea. He led me to the Special Force. He allowed me to free the oppressed. He made me realize I oppressed my own self, and then he raised me to this level of celebrity, and then now I'm oppressed. I've been worst off I've ever been, right? So I'm dying, and then that light comes, and I breathed into, like you gotta breathe into it. And then I would say it was an outer body experience. I felt like something was separated from the physical body. And I shot through the light, and I sat in this space of, I love you, I forgive you.
Are you saying that to yourself, or you're experiencing somebody
No, I'm
saying
hearing
that
it.
You hear
I'm
it.
hearing through my voice, I forgive you, and I love you, and this is what love feels like. And it was something I never felt from anybody. I mean, my wife loves me to death, but there's no love in this physical world that can ever produce what I felt then. I accept you for who you are, your rights, your wrongs, everything. Right? I heard it all. And as I breathed, I felt the world, like the oneness of everything, you know. And then the weight, you know, of the world pulls you back into your body. And I did that 3 times, shot up through the hole 3 times. And, you know, I wanted to go to 4th, but Trevor's like, no more. Done. Right?
Put the pipe down.
Yeah, put it down. That really changed me, man. Like it interrupted the patterns of this world. I started praying, and I would use the word God, but I didn't know what God was. Is it Dallas? Is it the universe? Oneness? What is God? You know, and I don't own a Bible. I didn't even open a Bible at that time, you know. So I was chasing God, right? And I would talk to God every day. And then Marcus and Amber Capone, they emailed me and say, hey, T, I want you to be the keynote speaker at the Vets Gala. I want you to help us raise money for veterans. Honor, like huge honor to stand in front of Tier 1 Navy guys and Tier 1 Army guys to raise funds to help them, you know, through psychedelics. Like, it changed my life. So I was a keynote speaker, and, you know, being in these galas, I mean, it opens you up to the world of professional healers, shamans, like the best in the world. They were Tier 1 guys. So I met this healer that specialized in Wachuma, which is they call it grandfather. Each psychedelic has a spirit that enters you, right? Each one of them is a teacher. And at that stage, I'm like, okay, this is the way to go. This is how I heal. So I sat with what Wuma, and what Wuma does is it slows down your nervous system enough where you become present. We're never present. We're drinking caffeine. We're overstimulated in social media, conversation, gossip, you name it. Right, our own intentions of this. We're never present. And what Wuma, what it did was it slowed down my nervous system enough where I was present. Almost when I'm sitting outside, I could see there were hummingbirds that were flying by, and I could literally see the flapping of their wings. Like everything was slowed down. Everything slows down.
And this is another psychedelic?
Another psychedelic. Yeah. And the only guys that get invited here is top tier veterans. You know, it's a vetting program to even get in this program. And you're sitting in some, you know, native reservation, Indian reservation, you know. We hold so much trauma in our bodies. So a lot of our energy is stored in our subplexus. So like if you're worried about, let's say, your child, your wife, I mean, we feel sick literally right here, right? Meditation allows you to breathe into the lower reservoir of your lungs, so that's the trap energy. Imagine a whole life of not being able to clear this trap energy, and this trauma is literally, this energy is just stuffed into the lower abdominal area of your lungs. What it does is when you sit with other warriors, you radiate a frequency. Especially when you sit with a bunch of tier 1 guys, like these are warriors, right? And you go into a sitting back breathing. There's breath control work, and then they play these tribal instruments live. And what it does is, if you're able to breathe into the lower reservoirs of that lung, it start moving energy into your heart. The heart is the most powerful chakra. You know about the energy centers. Mm-hmm. So the heart is the most powerful chakra. It's the most intelligent over the brain, the heart. So the spiritual healer will have you move the energy, the trauma to your heart, and then that's where it releases.
And so they're walking you through this?
They're walking us through it. Like, and you see the senior guys. There was a Team 6 guy there, and he was a master at it. Like, literally, I'm like, wow, how do you get there? You know, like he was able to release trauma and then run outside. And when you release trauma and you go outside, the frequency of Earth will literally pull the trauma from your body. Like you're shaking, and it literally pulls. You could feel it, the energy. This dark energy coming out of your body back into Earth. And I saw it from that Team 6 guy. I'm like, wow, he knows how to work this thing. And at first I didn't understand that warfare. I didn't understand that terrain. You know, it's a different war. You know, and it's a war because you have to understand the terrain. Like, if you don't understand that jungle warfare, you're not going to be good in that jungle war, right? So this is spiritual warfare. So I went back for 4 years. I went back every spring and every fall, and I sat with grandfather, the medicine. And I would say at the 4th year mark, every time you go back, it teaches you more and more, and it comes in like a different teacher. So for me, I think because I'm Asian descent, it came to me more of a Kung Fu lesson. But when I talked to another, like a SEAL, he's seeing totally something else. It's teaching him in a different way, but mine was Kung Fu lesson.
Do you think your hereditary background plays a big role in that ancestral? Mm-hmm. Like, you know, Northern European maybe has a Viking vibe to it.
There was a Viking that showed up for the SEALs, and there was a Norwegian. He came from that descent, and a Norwegian Viking background taught him that. And some were, you name it, right? So different warrior, but it's all warrior stuff.
Yeah, because I'm fascinated and curious about, you know, the hereditary kind of remembrance, or the passing down of almost consciousness, because there has to be a connection. I think I truly believe we're all connected, but especially with your ancestors, you know, and where they lived, and you know, wherever those generations of people that we all come from spent most of their time, which, you know, up until the last couple hundred years, it was pretty much in one spot for the most part for millennia or centuries at least. That's such a fascinating commonality that both is very common but also has very stark contrasts.
So it would teach me, every time I go back, it would teach me a lesson. And that energy that was being released, like literally, it will buckle your body up. So you're laying on the floor, it will jack you and slam you back on the ground. Like that energy is real. I went with a SEAL Team 3 guy, and he saw my soul.
Wow. Is going through the Ibogaine process a prerequisite to doing the grandfather?
No, it's being in that world.
Yeah.
Being in that community, knowing this person that leads you down that route, you know, like, because the psychedelic world is so many different psychedelics. You know, you got ayahuasca, Wachuma, you got, you know, 5-MeO, you got Boga, you know, toad venom. Like, which one are you going to take, right? And why? But me being at that gala opened me up to all these healers. And I went down Wachuma because it was a masculine teacher. You know, ayahuasca, the Amazon vine, they call her grandmother. So she teaches you, and that's what they do. They take on a personality of the spirit of a grandfather. Like, how would your grandfather teach you? He'll probably put you on his lap and go, yeah, I messed up too.
Yeah.
And that's how the grandfather taught me.
That's amazing.
But in a Kung Fu setting, like I would go and it was just all these dark energy would attack me, and I didn't know how, and I would get slammed and thrown around. And I remember the healer go, you got to know how to surrender. And then after the 4th year, the medicine would talk to you, and it comes in your voice. So you think it's your thoughts, but it's not. So what I started doing was I realized that's the spirit realm. So I'll go in the spirit realm, I'll connect knowledge, I'll get the wisdom, and I'll come back and I'll apply it to the world. And it's literally the fruit of the spirit. Forgiveness, come back, forgive. Compassion, come back, compassion, apply to your life, right? And I will sit with that. If I go in the spring, I will sit with that the fall, and then I'll go back for the second lesson. You know, for 4 years I did that. And it got to the point where they said you need to go deeper. And I didn't understand what that meant. And it's kind of like a bird. If you ever look at a bird, like, how does a bird learn how to fly? It's not the mother like just flapping around saying, this is how you fly. Like, it's instincts. Right. So the medicine, it enters you, and it's like instincts, you know, like, okay, I need to inhale through my nose and exhale through my mouth into the point where I run out of air, keep on going till I pass out and die, is what it told me. That's the deeper. So I said, okay, I'll do it. You know, and I remember the 8th time I said, the 4th year I sat, and it told me to die, and I inhaled through my nose and I exhaled through my mouth. It's kind of like when you're diving, free diving, and you go down and you're off gas, and you have no more air, and you keep on going, you're going to pass out, right? Mm-hmm. My ancestors showed up. In a Vietnamese formal, they call it ao yai, you know, it was red and gold and like Chinese. And they showed up and they said, trust, you know. And I off gas. And then I remember darkness started closing in. And it gets to a certain point where you're out of breath, and then you black out and the heart reboots. So when I said heart rate, so I'm wearing an eye mask, but you see this blue light radiating from your heart. And it's almost like a defibrillator when they hit you in the heart. And you feel this energy, and it reset my heart. It's resetting every time. It said die again. So I did it again, and boom, it reset my heart. There's a lot of seminars that they hold to clear your heart chakra, and I feel that's what I was doing. It was pure. It was making my heart stronger, like making me love more, compassionate more, right? And I felt it, and then afterwards, my body started shaking, and then I would run outside, and there it is. The trauma would start going back to earth, right? They call it grounding. And then it told me I needed to die again. But this time it was weird because when I went to that point where the heart should have reset, it never did this time. This was the final lesson. So off gas, and then the unveiling, it looks like dark clouds started unveiling, and I saw clear as day, Jesus, the image. And then that was it, right? So I came out of that, and I'm like, I saw an image of Jesus. And I'm like, and I wasn't still, like, I wasn't saved, right? And at that point, I was chasing an image of God, but I didn't know what God was. And I remember sitting that for years. I sat with that. I would say for a year, I sat with that.
What time window is this? Is this like 20 to 24?
Yeah.
So 24 is when you saw the image of Jesus, and that was the last time.
Yeah.
Can you describe what he looked like to you?
Textbook Jesus, the way that he looks, you know, in all the images we have. He just sat there, and he just looked at me. No expression, no, and I don't know if it was a still shot, but it was just a quick image, and I had to go back because I couldn't keep on going so much deeper, right? But he just sat there, and that was it.
Did you feel a connection to the eyes? Because I've watched a lot of, I've interviewed a lot of guys who have gone through this process and done the rabbit hole of near-death experiences where there's so many parallels of people, all different religions, genetic backgrounds, cultural experiences, et cetera, and it's all really similar, which to me is encouraging. But also, I've noticed a recurring theme, and they speak about the power behind his eyes. And I wonder did you see him long enough to experience that?
I did, not at that point.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand why Jesus at that point. Remember, I never read the Bible.
Yeah, but you knew it was him unequivocally.
100%. He looks like every image that I saw of Jesus. Not hanging on the cross. He was just sitting there in his robes, and he was very humble looking, beard and all, just staring at me. And then that was the last image I saw. That was the last day. And then I'm back to this reality, and I had to sit with that. Like, what does that even mean? Remember, I didn't believe in Jesus. I thought, with my upbringing, I thought the Bible was just a bunch of, stories put together to make you more morally correct, I didn't know. Remember, I never read the Bible. I was never around any of that, never believed it. I knew that there was a higher being, but I was more Taoist, in the Taoism, and Buddha had something. He was a teacher, so he taught us about compassion. So I was more that because of my heritage. And like I said, my stepfather, he didn't have that back then. So I was more leaning towards that. So I started chasing the Father, and I started calling him Father. And I didn't even know why, right? So I started talking so my biological father died when I was in the Iraq War. Never really had a relationship with him because of my parents' divorce. But I started talking to him. You'll be proud of who I am, Dad. I became this Green Beret. I freed the oppressed, and I'm an entrepreneur of this company, and you'll be proud of me. Every day I would talk to him, right? I would say for 2 weeks. And then I realized one day when I was talking to him, I wasn't chasing my father. I was chasing the image of a father.
The Father.
The Heavenly Father. So then I'm like, oh, that's it. So I started talking to Heavenly Father, right? And I would call him Father and this and that. And I would try to have a relationship with him. And then during my meditation session of breathing and emptying, I heard clear as day, if you're chasing me, then you have to go through my son. And I didn't understand what that meant. Like, what, this guy again? Like,
Wow.
you know? And then I went back for a second interview with Sean Ryan when my book was released, and Sean was really into Jesus at that point, like, you know. And then all my friends started talking about Jesus, like veterans friends and cop friends, and like, this guy again. Because my image of Jesus is, you were defeated, you were hung on the cross, like you were nailed. Like, how did you win anything? Like, because I was so ignorant to that, you know, I didn't understand any of it.
You've mentioned a word a few times that to me it just ties it all together, which is surrender. You know, like the power in that, and I think that's I think one of the hardest things for guys like us to do, because it's so anti everything that we know and believe and feel and fight for, and it's like the opposite of that, you know. And I know for me personally, like that's the key component, you know, is being able to let that go.
But how, you know, like, how do we surrender?
Yeah.
And then as I got, you know, and my popularity was growing more, and, you know, just Call of Duty and the training world, the tactical industry. Like, I'm at SHOT Show, people are lining up, getting my autographs, and companies now have, you know, sponsors, and I was that guy, you know, like, I built a brand in a very hard industry, but I didn't do it, God did, you know. But that weight, man, like the burden of that, like, it was killing me. I wasn't who I was saying I am. I'm standing in front of a kid who's idolizing me, and I couldn't give him that, you know.
Like, you feel like an imposter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a fake. And I carried it, you know, and I wanted to be a better husband to my wife, and I wasn't that. Not to full capacity I wanted to be, you know. Trying to fix past relationships, and blew up in my face, you know, and just... I would walk my dog and that's when I talked to God, you know. I walked my dog through a trail, through the woods, and I literally yelled at him, talked to him, right? And, you know, for 2 weeks I talked to my deceased father. And then one day I didn't want to talk to that anymore, and I wanted to talk to Jesus. And your heart is broken. Like, that's what it felt like. My heart was broken, and I couldn't carry that burden anymore. And I felt like I was speaking from the heart, not intellectually anymore. It was from my heart. Like, I could not bear this. And I told him I'm a sinner. I told him that I failed, and I told him that I'm such a fake. I'm sorry. I said, take it from me. Instantly I felt it. I felt this love and forgiveness, like same like that 5-MeO DMT, but it was on my left side.
What do you think that is?
It felt like it came from my left side, but it was just, I love you, I forgive you. And I knew it was Jesus. And I remember crying, and he walked with me the rest of the way home. That night I couldn't sleep. If I wake up, I just think of Jesus. You know, like, I love you. I remember that I wake up and I say, I love you, and I'll go back to bed, right? And I would wake up every 30 minutes telling him I love him, I'll go back to bed. Like, I couldn't sleep. I just thought about him all night. So, you know, in the mornings I would meditate, and I would, you know, do my physical training. At that point, I wasn't into the Bible yet. And, you know, when I'm running, I would hear the intrusive thoughts come in, you know, just kill yourself, or you're worthless. What, remember when you did this? And those came in. But all I had to do is just think of Jesus. It was gone. I couldn't even remember what I was thinking about.
Wow.
All I had to do is just think of him, and it was gone. And if I tried to recall what I was thinking, I couldn't. So I knew that was the Holy Spirit, to enter me. At that time, I didn't know. He gave me that gift for 3 days. And after that, the intrusive thoughts came back, and the burden came back, and everything else. And that's when I broke up with the Bible. I don't know what led me to the Gospel of John first, but that was where I started in the beginning. And then it directs you. Like, I don't know how he directs you. He directs you kind of like, you want to do this. I'm like, oh, I do, right? So I read the Gospel of John, and it led me to the Old Testament. And I remember staying in the Old Testament for a year. Why Jesus? I remember asking, like, why? And I read the Old Testament, the fall of man to Genesis and the Exodus and the Acts, when the Holy Spirit came down. Like, I read that over and over. And then I would start meditating to it with the earbuds on in the mornings, meditation for a year. And I realized the reason why Jesus is because after the fall of man, God created us so we can be his child, so he can literally hang out with us in the Garden of Eden. It was the fall of Adam who separated us because God can't be around sin. The Father cannot be around sin. So when Adam and Eve fell, that separated man from God. And, man been trying to chase God. You see it through Psalms when, King David sinned with Bathsheba, and, he lost his way. He was chasing God's heart. And, in the Old Testament, they would, the Israelites, after Moses saved the Israelites and they roamed around the desert for 40 years, they built the tabernacles and the holy temples, and they sacrificed, animals so they can just have that moment with God just for that. But it always returns back. It was all temporary. Because we're born in sin.
Did you find that was your parallel, and maybe that's why you're directed in that fashion, is that's what you continue to experience?
Mm-hmm. I was chasing the temporary. And it wasn't until, God, Jesus, came down, and he was the perfect lamb. He was the perfect sacrifice. So when the Father sees the Son, he sees us, through the Son, if we are covered in Jesus' blood. After, in the book of Exodus, when Moses tells the Israelites to put, the blood of the lamb on the doors, right? That was temporary, right? So the deaf can pass that. So Jesus did the same. Like, if you're covered in the blood of Jesus, you defy death. And I realized that at a certain point after, I would say 3 years of every day studying. There's something in the Word. I used to look at the Bible as, I read it as a text, like a textbook, right? You read it, and the Holy Spirit directs you how to read it. I want you to read this. I want you to marinate on that. It changes you. It directs you. He tells me every morning what I should read, what I should do if I surrender to him. I prayed to him this morning. He told me what I should say to you. This whole conversation is him talking through me. I'm a servant. That's what surrender is. So the temporary was the psychedelics. It was all temporary. It always came back, and it will come back more angry. Because when the unclean spirit leaves the body, it roams around in the dry places, only to come back, find your house swept and clean, and it'll come back with 9 more worse than it, right? So the demons will always return to the empty vessel. But if you have the Holy Spirit dwelling, he can't return back. And that's to me, that was it, right? And I realized that. And then when I surrendered completely to Jesus, and up until then, I had a problem saying Jesus. I had a problem saying his name. Like I never understood why. Like I would say God, I would say universe, I would say, in the Tao Te Ching, they call it the Tao, which is the universe. I would say it all, like oneness, anything to avoid the name Jesus. It wasn't until I was saved and I had to read, like the Holy Spirit directed me, is when now I openly say, no, it's Jesus. It has to be Jesus. Because, and I want to explain this, because I was very Eastern philosophy, right? Taoist. There's a lot of Buddhists out there. And although Buddha taught us the way of compassion and oneness and emptiness, and those are all relevant, like all of it, the meditation, all of it is relevant. But Buddha was a human. He wasn't God. And he's not the perfect sacrifice. See, Buddha was born in sin. He's born from the seed of Adam. Is Jesus, who came from God, who, when Adam and Eve got kicked out of the garden, you bite my heel, I stomp your head. That means I'm going to separate my seed from your seed. He said that from the moment of sin. I want to ask you this, Mike, like God, the all-knowing Father, who dwelled in the garden with Adam, when Adam and Eve sinned, and then they found out they were naked, right? And they hid in the bushes, and God came in. He goes, Adam, where are you? Well, God knows everything. Why would he ask Adam, where is he at in the garden?
I mean, the only, I guess, assumption I could make is wanting him, even though he knows, he wants you to be upfront with him about it. And to me, I would take that as a reflection of confession eternally, or indefinitely, is that he knows, right? He knows every mistake we've ever made. He wants you to come clean with it, and admit it to him.
Confession is like the Christian life, right? I don't know how much I confess nowadays, like walking through the airport, lust, confess, look your eyes down, right? Like anything, greed, envy. I do envy a lot. And I think that's a childhood trauma for me, survival. I had to fight for scraps on the table kind of deal, and now I'm this very successful guy, but I'll look at another guy and I'm envious, and I wonder why. It was a childhood trauma I never resolved, So I'll confess that, I'll give it to him, and the more I give to Jesus, the more I realize it's like flexing that muscle, right? Flexing that muscle. The more like you confess your sins. So that's what God wanted. That's what the Father wanted. He wanted Adam, just confess your sin. And I don't know, like I think back to, like, if Adam confessed his sin in the garden, will we still be where we're at? Because he blamed on his wife, Eve, and she blamed on the serpent, right? Like them pointing the fingers. So I'm wondering, like, if Adam would just confess his sin to the Father, which Jesus taught us, would we still be kicked out of the garden?
I mean, it almost reminds me of the Matrix scene with the spoon, of when they knock, him opening the door knocks the thing over, and I'm screwing the scene up, but it's kind of the gist of, like, if the end is the inevitable thing, how you get there almost doesn't matter. Is that, if that was the intent or the plan all along, then it's going to end up where it's at no matter what, kind of thing, if that makes sense. I don't know, maybe it's confusing, but
so I used to think, like, in the beginning of my walk, I'm like, if I get up at 3 a.m, and if I do this, and I read the Bible, and I pray even though I don't feel like praying, and if I do this, it's all me. See, I hasn't surrendered yet. And there was a certain point where, yeah, I found Jesus and I was saved, but I didn't know how to walk. I didn't know how to walk yet, right? So I cut out all music. I say I'm on 2 years of that. I cut out all music.
But you don't ever listen to music?
No, I will when the season's right. This season I cut out all the music because I realize that affects the nervous system, your mood. It could drown out the noise. See, the Holy Spirit, so I had 50 years. So 49 I was saved. I had 50, almost close to 50 years of living in this old man's body of sin. And then now, when Nicodemus came to Jesus and said how he said, you have to be reborn. He said, well, what, you climb up in your mother's womb and be reborn? No, you're reborn through the Holy Spirit. But the Holy Spirit, when it dwells in you, is literally like a little baby in the beginning. Now, when you're saved, the Holy Spirit enters you, you can continue to look at lust, chase envy, gossip, and that will drown out the noise. But I realized at one point the Holy Spirit likes for me to read the Bible, and it gets stronger as I read the Word is the daily bread, right? So I'm feeding that spirit, and it's stronger. And the more you walk with faith, the more you can hear Him. It's almost like a crowded room, and you hear all these voices, but the more you get to know Him, you can hear Him through this crowded voice. He'll tell me, oh yeah, you stared at that way too long, you need to repent. And I'm like, oh, I repent. And I'll look at the ground, right? Whatever that sin is. And you become more aware of your sin. Like I said, I'm envious. Why? So I surrendered to Jesus, and then where I am now is he's making me realize that a lot of my childhood trauma affects who I am. Like, why am I jealous of you? Why when you say a negative comment, look, you're in a public space, we get haters, right?
Oh yeah.
Why does that bother me so much? Like, I can have thousands of people just saying thank you to you, you changed my life, and have that one a-hole who just makes a bad comment and it ruins my day. Why? Why do I care about what you have to say? I don't even know you. And I realize now that it affects my childhood trauma, and that's burned into my nervous system. Tu Lam was on a boat when people were dead and dying. The whole country I was facing genocide at a young age. I wasn't accepted in America. Like, all those things, all those events burned into my subconscious. Now I'm sitting in you as an unsecure man, caring what somebody thinks that I don't even care about, because I never resolved that, So the Holy Bible revealed that to me, and then I started working on my childhood traumas. I started reading how the nervous system is affected through childhood trauma, and why we believe the things we believe in, the things of this world. And ancestral trauma has a lot to do. My mother was trying to fight for her life when I was in her belly. Her nervous system affects my nervous system. So in the moment I was born, I already had trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Ancestral trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what's interesting, not to make every episode about dogs at some point, but the importance of the environment that you have a brood female in when she's gestating the puppies makes an enormous difference in how those pups can turn out, environmental stability-wise especially. And, so a female that's stressed out and, constantly in that fight or flight, sympathetic state or whatever, can negatively impact the puppies dramatically, and so it only stands to reason that a species who's cognitively far more advanced, that it would be even more that way, and it is fascinating how, the ancestral piece, again, I think it seems, or it feels like a subconscious component has to be connecting you to, the generations of human beings that created you. You know, like it almost seems laughable that it wouldn't be that way. It's like, well, why? Of course it would be that way. I am curious hearing you talk about working on trauma outside of the education component of understanding the nervous system. What would have been some other means with which you've been able to process or work through those things to actually be able to move past them and not let them affect you anymore?
Awareness has a lot to do with that. Like, why do I feel the way I do? Like, why am I bothered by this guy? Why am I jealous? You know, so awareness. And I realized, oh, I'm jealous because I was that survival child. I was a refugee. You know, I lived in the grass huts when I was 4 years old. My bed was dirt in the jungle. You know, when other people had beds, I was laying in the dirt, and there was a cemetery of dead bodies in shallow graves around the refugee camps where people died. Like, you know, that was my surrounding. And then spit on in America, calling racist names, never felt like I fit in. So yeah, that's why it bothers me and it hurts me. Yeah, I'm this successful man now and ex-commando, like did a lot of great stuff, but there was a lot of things that held me back in life. And when Jesus saves you, the Holy Spirit reviews these things in you, and he helps you through it, through the Word. So what helps me through it these days is, look, Jesus is the ultimate Green Beret. He frees the oppressed. Like, we oppressed ourselves, you know, like he saved me. And, you know, people, and now I feel like I'm not running away from my past anymore. I'm helping other people through theirs. In my trials and tribulations, it's a part of my testimony and how he guided me through life. And he already chose me before the world was even developed. Isn't that crazy? Like, God knew what was in your heart before the world was even developed.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap your mind around, you know. And I think that's one of the most fascinating things, and where, you know, faith plays such an integral role in being able to let go and realize, like we were talking about before, a lot of times you have a plan, you have a goal, you have a door that you're trying to get through that just gets shut, continues to get shut. And you find yourself asking why, you know, and being, you know, disappointed or even upset, you know, like, why wouldn't you let me have this or achieve this or, you know, whatever. And then realizing later that it's like, that would have been terrible if that would have actually happened. You know, something I thought I wanted, thought I needed, thought would be the best thing for me would have been catastrophic. You know?
100%. Yeah,
that's hard to see in those moments, but.
And you kind of see, like, the position he puts you in. Like, you know, now he put me as this leader. I'm this teacher to many law enforcement officers. You know, I'm a public speaker now, speaking to a lot of, you know, I'm speaking to the next generation of Green Berets coming up, you know, and I'm speaking to police officers and kids in high school, you know, and he gave me this platform. But once the Holy Spirit enters you, you realize that when Jesus looked at Simon, right, and he said, I'll make you a fisherman of men. That's what it is now. It's like, I can't stop talking about him. And I just want to say, like, not necessarily me save, it's Jesus saving, but I want to talk about him, and I want to share my story. I'm like, I'm a sinner, and I was so far in the darkness, and he saved me. Let me tell you how he could save you. Like, that's what brings me peace now. And the more I can save people on the platform that God's given me, you know, I stand in front of thousands and I talk about Jesus these days. You know, and he'll direct me to that one. I'll leave the 99 for that one. He directs me to that one. And when I say that is, you know, we're releasing this weapon I was working with. You know, I have my own brand of guns and lines, and I had to go promote it. And we were at this after party And I hate those after parties, right? Drinking and sinners and it was 200 people there. And he guided me to this young girl. I didn't know why I needed to talk to her, but she was a Call of Duty fan. So she came up to me and she talked to me, and we got on the message of God, and she flicked off God. She literally took her middle finger and flicked him off. And I remember grabbing her hand, hugging her, and I said, let me tell you how he saved me. And it turned out she was raped a month ago.
Prior to that. Wow.
And I talked to her for an hour, and then she said, how can I find God again? So I saved her.
Yeah, that's amazing. 200
people, I found her. He directs you. He guides you. And, it's a blessing being on this show, because I know, like, this message is going to hit other people, right? And, like, so he calls us to be a disciple, a fisher of men. It's almost like I'm walking. He's not here. Yeah, he is here, like, not physically here. He was 2,000 years ago, but I feel like he's here. Like I'm a disciple. I'm literally walking with him. That's what it feels like,
Yeah, it's such an incredible journey, and I see a lot of parallels in a number of ways between our life journeys, which is, again, not a coincidence that we're sitting here talking, having this conversation. I am curious, has the last few years of this life-changing journey that you've been on, has that changed what you want to do entrepreneurial-wise? Does it conflict at all with kind of the Ronin brand, so to speak, or what you kind of want to do moving forward? I imagine it's been pretty life-changing in those ways too.
When I first started Ronin, I wanted to show, like, this badass spec ops guy. Like, look at the skills, look at the ninja moves, like, and that's what made me Call of Duty, Ronin, and that's what got a lot of attention through the law enforcement world, the CQB, the tactics, and, and that is sexy, but the message is different these days. It's, I still teach tactics. I teach SWAT teams, and task force, and counter-narcotics teams all through America. But my message has changed these days. It's more about forgiveness. I give people how I saved myself, like how he saved me, but because it's a two-sided, right? I can always turn him away. Like how I live with the Holy Spirit, and I see like other people suffering. I don't want to help them. I'm part of a Bible study group where I lead. I'm part of one of the leaders of the Bible study group where I share my experience. And majority of my Bible study is law enforcement and ex-veterans. I help the veteran community in that aspect. Any chance I get, it's about Jesus. I would say that I stopped chasing the things of this world. I realized that he's going to give me my daily bread. And whatever comes out of it, so let's say contract for a big business thing for the military, right? So it can land millions here. And I used to be obsessed with money. Like, if I land that, I'll be so happy, they'll make me richer. I can get this car I always wanted, whatever, right? Whatever that thing is. Now, I just know it's going to happen. And if it doesn't, you have bigger plans for me. And I'm okay with that. My wife is different, right? She's very business savvy. I think she's my yin and yang, If I step in a room, I'll do stuff pro bono, whatever you want, right? She's, no, you're worth this, and she'll tell them what I'm worth. And usually it comes through, but I stopped chasing. That's the biggest difference. I stopped chasing. I'm listening more, and I want to bring others to Christ. That's all I care about.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. And I love to hear it, to see that journey and that progression and truly like the long game aspect of it is, it's just beautiful. I'm curious, how does that flesh out with her? Is she in the same boat as you religiously or faith-wise, or where does she sit on the spectrum of belief?
She's raised by two ministers. She had Jesus all through her life. She chases it, she chases the things of this world. But she has Jesus, and we go to church together. We I openly talk to her about my faith, and she helps me. She guides me. She was raised in a organized religion, so she was turned off by it for a little bit, but she always had faith. I truly feel like it was because of her I found Jesus.
How did she respond at that critical turning point moment for you?
When Jesus saved me?
Mm-hmm.
I sat with her for a little bit before I even told her, like I would say months.
Oh, wow.
Before I told her, but she saw the change in me. She, every time I get interviewed, by people, if she's around, they're like, well, when did you notice the change? She knew the change the moment I was saved. Even though I didn't talk about it, she knew, because she was raised in that environment. My in-laws, they're ministers. I was baptized by my father-in-law, in a Vietnamese church, Christian church. And he sees the difference in me, and everybody, from my buddy Jeff, who is sitting here today. He was there literally at the beginning of my training. I hired him on as because he knew the law enforcement world. He helped me navigate through that world. I was very Green Beret in the beginning, and I taught the way I would teach rebels, literally.
Yeah.
Use
of force, what's that?
Yeah. And Jeff, he tampered me down, but he saw me change throughout the years. It was very rough in the beginning, the way I talked to people, very bad language. I don't cuss anymore. And if I do, I repent for it.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. I'm curious a couple of things. One, because of your upbringing and background, does that, I guess, change your perspective? Not change your perspective. I guess I would ask, how does your upbringing, both coming to the United States, serving overseas in a host of capacities, how does that shape your perspective on, say, immigration policy now in the United States, with it being such a kind of a political hot potato?
A lot of countries didn't accept us when we lost our country. And one of the reasons why I fell in love with America and I wanted to serve America, because they gave me a country when I didn't have a country. My family was ripped apart. Family members were in prison, genocide, lived in a refugee camp. Like, America gave me a home. And when I look at like the withdrawal from Afghanistan, people we used to work with, I was part of, when I worked in the unit, I was part of this agency piece where we recruit indigenous people and teach them at the agency level on how to gather intelligence for us, and move down these hostile areas where I install, GPS and concealed cameras in the car to get atmospherics of the area. And a lot of them died fighting for us. And we left them. Not just them, their whole family, because their family's wiped out too.
Yeah.
So it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. Like, and I know America, we can't save everybody, but I think that we could have tried a little bit harder. The way that we withdrew.
At a minimum, we could have been smarter about it. To me, I feel like it's not even an effort thing. It's a strategy thing. We just fumbled, period, which is frustrating.
But it's kind of reminds me of Vietnam, right? Like, it was an unpopular war and we just left.
Yeah.
Right. And I could tell, like, after the Americans left, like, you have, all this equipment that you left behind, but they don't have the fuel. They don't have the training. They don't, so the logistics behind it. So the South Vietnamese, they lost. And the Vietnamese that served alongside the Americans, their whole families wiped out, separated in these re-education camps where a lot of them, they never got reunited and they died in these camps, so, and then fast forward that to, Afghanistan, that's the same thing that happened. Iraq, same thing. Right. Yeah. So I guess for me is I understand it at a personal level, even as a Green Beret, when I served with the Green Berets, I didn't look at these indigenous people as indig people. I slept in those grass huts before. I had nothing, so it meant a lot to me when I was able to serve with the Green Berets, and that's what really led me to the Green Berets, to fight for the oppressed.
Yeah.
Because I came from that.
Yeah. With where you're at now, after being saved, do you find yourself paying attention to politics, generally speaking? Like, do you have an opinion, or do you pay attention to, Israel and Gaza situation, the Ukraine-Russia situation, and our pseudo involvement, what's going on in Iran? Like, is that something that you bandwidth-wise digest enough to say this is how I feel about it, or have you kind of removed yourself from all of it?
At first I used to follow the news a lot, and that was second nature for us, right? We're always deployed around the world. You have to know what's going on in the world to be deployed in an area, because you don't know what's next, right? Especially special operations guys. We're gone all the time. There was a certain point that I was gone 10 months out of the year for several years. And after I got out, I focused a lot on the news, and and I find that, nowadays I find, like, can I really change that? Like, Tu Lam, Ronin, can I change policies of a president? Can I, if I walk out in the streets and protest against, immigrants, or, like, how does that change anything? I know how I feel. My heart's broken from it. I give it to God. And where God has me these days is stop listening to that. The news is all, the news, social media, all of it makes money off of negative stuff, right? Negative press.
Or just attention in general. And I think psychologically that's what draws people in the most is negativity and fear-mongering and worry.
So if I wake up in the morning, I listen to the news, which I used to work out listening to current events. That affects my nervous system. That affects my day on something that I can't even change.
Yeah.
But what I can change is I can sit on Mike Drop's podcast and I could talk about Jesus, and that would save so many others. So my view on things is, no, I don't listen to music. I don't listen to media. I still kind of know what's going on because my wife, she likes to gossip and talk about, that. And even that, like, I have to tone her down a few times. Like, I don't want to hear it,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I found myself kind of the same way. Like, I would say just enough attention to have an idea of what's happening, because I don't want to be so oblivious to where it's like, oh, we're bombing Iran. I didn't know that. Yeah. Like, I want to at least know what our positions are without digesting it all day. Because I do think, at a minimum, at least having some idea what's going on and not being so naive to where it's dangerous is probably important. To your point, similarly, I think a lot of people find themselves asking, what can I do? In that kind of negative context of what is me as one person, like, really, no matter who you are, I mean, unless you're maybe Elon Musk, you know, but even then, it's like, you can still only do so much. So what, you know, it's almost a feeling of helplessness or hopelessness for a lot of people. And I think what you just said is really the key, you know, is that by being that beacon of light, you know, at a minimum, just set the example you want to see in the world. You know, don't criticize and judge everybody else for what they're doing wrong and how they should be doing whatever. You know, just be that example and just be a shining light for everybody, and do it to a degree with which people ask you, like, how are you the way that you are? Like, how are you that positive? How are you that friendly? How are you that easygoing? You know, like, to me, that really is the best example that I think anybody can set for the world. You know, the rising tide raises all ships kind of thing, is that if everybody just takes a more positive approach that way, the collective planet is in a far better place.
I can always, like, tell somebody who truly walks with God, not from what they say, but, you know, because there's a lot, right? There's a lot of, I found God, you know, I'm walking with it. And you can always tell from the fruit of the Spirit. Are you kind? Are you judgmental?
Yeah,
Are you compassionate to others? Do you give? You know, like, the fruit of the Spirit.
It's just the energy I think people give off, you know.
And I think people feel it,
Yeah.
like, the energy.
For sure. I guess, generally speaking, foreign events wise, because, you know, really your upbringing, I think, I mean, trying to imagine the hypothetical, right? If the United States had never gone into Vietnam, where would you be right now? It's impossible to know. But given that as kind of the framing, Ukraine, Russia, we have some involvement. We give a lot of assistance to Israel in the helping in combating, you know, their situation within Palestine, Gaza area, and now we have a pretty big involvement in Iran. Do you have a position on any of those three things in terms of, do you think America should have involvement in any of those three places?
I feel like any threat to America, we should be involved, at least put, you know, eyes and ears on the ground, a foothold into the area. I don't think that we should be involved with every aspect of it, you know. But man, it's tough, right? Because, you know, innocent lives are being involved with this. And, you know, so where I'm going with this is, okay, so North Vietnam divided from South Vietnam, and you're trying to liberate, you know, South Vietnam, but North Vietnam's attacking South Vietnam, civil war, like innocent people dying, you know, like when the Americans got involved, it became political, and, you know, Americans have, you know, millions of dollars, billions of dollars. How much money did we spend in Iraq and Afghanistan? Trillions.
Yeah, trillions.
You know what I mean? And did we change Iraq?
I think we made it worse, honestly. And I think more not more important, but I would say maybe more impactful than just Iraq is, I think that the issues we face with Iran and the issues that Hezbollah and Hamas pose now are more of a direct result of the power vacuum that we created by going into Iraq. Secondary and tertiary effects, I think, also that I don't think a lot of people maybe think of. But if you think about the refugee crisis that's been the last 10 years of, you know, millions, tens of millions of refugees streaming into Europe, changing the entire dynamic of that continent, are, I would say, a direct result of us going into Iraq. Because without Iraq, without toppling Saddam, Iran doesn't become emboldened and now, you know, have the ability to impact the amount of change that they did in the Israel region. You don't have the birth of ISIS, which
Yeah,
and
that came out, right?
Yeah, and then Syria, and that's where, you know, tens of millions of refugees now are displaced and have to go somewhere else and go to Europe. Not to mention, you know, millions of refugees coming here also, you know, really changing the dynamic of the entire world. And I think that one action, like if you think of it like a set of dominoes, it's like if you remove that one domino of us doing that, I think a lot of that, or maybe even all of it, never happened.
Yeah.
You know, and to
especially
me,
with
that's
the Syria and Zarqawi coming in with his Syrian rebels, because we removed Saddam out of the regime, his two sons, and that opened up a civil war between the Sunnis and the Shiites. And
well, it allowed Iran unchecked, basically, to do all of the things that they've done. You know, I mean, if you look at the real rise of Hamas and Hezbollah, I mean, they've been around a long time, you know, far longer than, or far prior to the invasion of Iraq, but you know, it's really in that mid-2000s region and to present when their ability to be emboldened has just skyrocketed, and it's because of that. I mean, it's the one of the big things that Saddam, I would say, provided in the region, as bad of a dude as he was, is that he was a big enough thorn in the side of Iran to where they didn't have the ability to do what they did for the last 20 years while he was in power, you know. And that trickle-down effect of, you know, then Iraq becoming the Wild West, where Al-Qaeda and foreign fighters, and then ISIS after we leave, and then they sweep into Syria. And again, it's just like, if you kind of reverse engineer it, it's like the one thing, because Afghanistan wouldn't have done, like if we had just gone into Afghanistan, none of that would have happened, I don't think. But us going into Iraq, you know, I think is the single probably biggest blunder that America has completed, maybe ever, you know, globally, just because of the global implications that's had for decades and will continue to have, I think, forever, you know, because you're not, you know, tens of millions of refugees from the Middle East into Europe and here and everywhere else, like that's toothpaste out of a tube that's not going back in. Like those people aren't going to go back, you know, and I just think that the problems and the trouble that's caused globally has been woefully under-realized.
And the reason why we went into Iraq is we declared it had weapons of mass destruction, and there was no...
I mean, to me, even if they do, right? I mean, Russia and China have nukes. We don't go there because, well, just in case, we don't want you to use them.
Yeah.
You know, and I feel the same thing about Iran, really, is that, you know, not that I would be happy about them getting nuclear weapons or developing them, but on the same token, it's like, to a certain extent, like they're in tight with China and Russia. They both have nuke capabilities. If they wanted one bad enough, they could probably snag one from them.
Yeah.
And, you know, I understand them wanting them to want a seat at the table and be taken serious enough to where we wouldn't do something like this if they had a nuclear weapon, probably, because, again, same reason you don't see us doing something like this to any nuclear power is the threat of that, you know, levels the playing field. But I just, you know, it's hard for me to completely support that, you know, and I understand, you know, it's a brutal regime, they're hard on their people. To your point, you can't save everybody. If you use that as your metric for getting involved in a country's civil affairs, there's about 300 other places on the planet that we should be doing it too. I mean, there's half a dozen in sub-Saharan Africa that are numbers-wise even worse off genocidally than what's taken place in Iran, and we've done almost nothing about that. I know we do some things in the Horn of Africa, and in certain places we have some military involvement, but I mean nothing even close to the scope and scale that's going on in Iran. So to me, it's just all confusing. It's contradictory. But at the end of the day, I default back to I'm not really going to worry about it, because I know what I believe, I know what I think, and that gives me more peace than anything has ever given me in my life. You know, I see that in you too, which is really neat.
It's almost, you know, when you're saved, you don't fear death.
No. Yeah, it's like I can have an opinion on all this stuff, but I can tell you I don't lose a wink of sleep over it. I don't find myself being consumed by the thoughts of it, you know, at all, and I used to, you know. Similarly, like when I first got out, I mean, I was glued to the news all day long, you know, on mainstream media, social media, just, you know, addicted to it, you know, and it was such a negative impact on my train of thought, my mood, my relationships with my kids. I mean, you know, it has such a powerful impact. I mean, what you consume in every way, you know, it's not just the food you take in. Consumption is consumption, and if that's negative thought loops, through news or through social media or through crime documentaries. I mean, if you spend all day watching true crime.
Yes, my wife. She
I mean, that's a lot of women, I think.
Yeah.
But you think about that, it's like, well, that can't have a collective positive impact on your psyche if you spend, several hours a day watching cases of brutality and murder and rape and, all these negative things. And it's just like, why don't we focus on the good for a little while, What is next for you?
So God has me on a lot of speaking these days, public speaking a lot these days. So I'm still in the gun industry. I'm still, training. But truly what's next for me is continue to walk this path of peace. Continue to shape myself every day into a better human. I'm flawed, and I realize that, but try to make up for who I was, continue to die to that old man, and encourage others, through my story. I'm not anybody special. God had me on a journey.
I would disagree, but
thank you. God had me on a journey. My journey was from, the oppressed to freeing the oppressed, and then realizing I oppressed myself, and then Jesus coming down to save us all, right? Like that's truly my story, and to share that story and to help influence the next generation through, the small little celebrity status that he allowed me to have, through Call of Duty, and like I find myself in front of elementary schools now, and you're speaking to these little kids that play my character, but they think I'm going to come in and talk about being a tough guy, but I talk about Jesus and and how to be kind to one another, and so that was part of my journey, and being able to share my journey, that's more important than all the successes, all the fame, or anything, right? To be able to live that life, and he's allowed me to live that life, and I surrender myself to that.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Two things. One, I can't believe I forgot in the lightning round to ask, as tactically driven as you have been for most of your life, do you have a preferred EDC?
I do.
Yeah.
I
Can you share, or are you willing to share what that is?
For my everyday carries, 365
Yeah.
SIG.
Same here.
I run, just with it's the Legion one, so it's the full
Yeah.
metal frame. It's a little heavier, but it's great for the snap, on the gun. It has a comp at the end, so, for a short slide, concealed carry, that thing is super accurate.
Pretty manageable, I imagine.
Round capacity on it, optic ready, tac light ready. So that is my go-to,
Yeah.
to SIG 365.
What about like the less practical? You're on a range and you want to be able to demo the best. Are you going staccato XC or something like that?
I do. I in fact, you nailed it. I have a Ronin staccato XC.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's it has all Ronin. It's Ronin-fied, so it has all the Japanese Bushido on it.
Like engraved on it?
Engraved, deep engraved. And they sell that, so me being in the gun industry, I'm able to be this artist with I work with a lot of different gun companies, and, they engrave Ronin and stuff, and then they realize, I have my brand, so they can make money off of the artwork I put on the guns, but if I was at a flat range, which I am, shooting a lot, teaching law enforcement, if I'm teaching law enforcement in a or military, I run like a striker fire pistol, Glock's always reliable. But I love the 2011s.
Yeah. Is the XC your favorite, or do you have what is it, the Viper that was the John Wick?
I like the XC.
Ronin, yeah.
Yeah, it feels good in my hands. I like the barrel combination. Shoots super flat. I run that. And when I first joined the Army, being on the SIFT teams in Okinawa, we were running 1911s,
Really?
1911s. Even in the unit, when I first came there,
Yeah.
they're running the Caspian, 1911s. It wasn't until we got to Afghanistan when, a lot of malfunctions. It's a competition gun. Any dirt, debris gets in it, it's going to slide lock on you. They sent out unit armors to to fix the guns, and it got to a certain point where we switched over to the Glock 22s, and Glocks carried its weight in combat. It never malfunctioned on me. From Afghanistan, the Middle East, all the Middle East countries to the Horn of Africa, like that was a proven combat platform.
Yeah.
So I like running that, but I don't know. There's something about the classic 1911 style gun that I love shooting it. It's so fun.
Yeah. I'm there with you on the XC. I admittedly have not shot many of the super top end, crazy expensive 2011s, but of the ones that I have, that's my favorite, and I mean that's the one I have actually because of that.
The SIG 211, have you ever shot that?
I haven't.
So that's their new 2011 platform. Straight out of the box, it's probably one of the most solid platforms besides the Staccato XCs. But it's a lot cheaper than Staccato XC. The Staccato XC is four, 6
I mean,
grand.
if you're putting a light and optics on it, you're looking at closer to 6 probably.
Yeah.
So I mean that's a good sniper rifle price. You can get a Nemo Arms 300 Win Mag for that price. Obviously not like Accuracy International, but still, I mean that's a lot for a pistol. But like most things, it's relative, and provided it's affordable for the buyer, it's for sure worth it, I think.
So what do you run at a flat range?
That's funny. I mean, the exact same thing. I've got a 365 in my bag with a light and a Vortex red dot on it, and then I have a Staccato XC that from a gun belt flat range. If I just want to practice shooting mechanics, that's what I use, and it's got the Streamlight TLR 7 HX on it, and the Trijicon red dot on it.
Okay.
Which I actually prefer the green dot, but man, they're hard to find.
I have to go red.
Yeah.
I'm used to picking up fiber optic sights on red.
Yeah.
And the red optic, I can definitely pick up that reticle faster. I've been working with Holosun Optics in the industry, and great company, closed emitter optic. And I've been running, so I have my own optic within Holosun. Cool. So I run the EPS for my 365, which is their everyday carry, and then I have my own Ronin 507 comp, which is a big window, optic.
That's really cool. I do like the rounded, if that's what they even. I mean, I'm not the gun nut that I think a lot of guys are, or even assume that I am, but I do like the rounded optic a little better for flat range stuff. I wouldn't want to EDC that, I don't think.
What rifle you run?
So the company doesn't even exist anymore, I don't think. It's called Roughneck Firearms.
Okay.
There was a guy, it was actually a firefighter down in Houston years ago that just started making guns, and they were like half MOA ARs that were just flawlessly. He didn't make many of them, but I managed to get a 5.56 and a 308 version of that.
Nice.
With Trijicon reflexes on it. And those are the two main rifles that I use. I'm looking at that. I don't know if you're familiar with Nemo Arms. Have you heard of them? Mm-hmm. They make AR platform, sub MOA 300 Win Mags, and they do some other calibers. I think maybe some 6.5s and 300 blackout maybe, but the kind of their bread and butter is a 300 Win Mag, and they've got a bunch of different ones, but like from a hunting and kind of, if you want to call it practical application, not that I plan on doing, using it outside of a hunting trip here or there. They've got the Recon model, which is kind of the long enough barrel to be accurate for as far as you'd need, but it's not like a 26-inch barrel where you're, knocking shit over trying to carry it or getting stuck in the woods. But I don't have many long guns, frankly.
Okay.
I've got a few lever actions, some 30-30s and 45-70s, and I love that, like, out on the range brush gun kind of vibe, with, like, the neoprene sleeve with an extra 6 or 7 rounds on the buttstock, and like the simplicity and kind of throwback aspect of that I appreciate. Kind of reminds me of a revolver, except I don't like shooting revolvers. The lever action's just kind of a neat gun, but and then a few shotguns and a couple other ARs that are not anything special. But again, I don't have like a huge long gun collection that way. But even with the pistols, I don't have tons of them. I've got, the ones that I carry, and a few Glocks, and some Springfields and a Kimber and whatever. But I don't have like a huge safe with 300 guns in it or anything. But how about you? Are you what long gun?
Oh, I'm in the gun industry, so I get to work with some of the best companies. Genesis shotgun, they make a AR style shotgun, and we have our own Ronin style shotgun. He's the one who made the John Wick shotgun.
Oh, nice.
So we work with Genesis Arms, Cody out of Genesis. He's a good friend of mine. We're in the talks with Sons of Liberty. They're the one who just landed the SOCOM contract. Team 6 is picking up those rifles. Huxwork suppressors.
What was the company?
Sons of Liberty.
Sons of Liberty.
Yeah, they're out in San Antonio.
Yeah.
In fact, I fly out of here and I link up with Genesis to film a commercial with Bill Goldberg.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and we're linking up with Sons of Liberty out there. But Huxwork suppressors, they're the one that the unit, and I think Team 6 is using it. They have the flow-through suppressor system, so that gas is not kicking up in your eyes and face. Just a lot of great companies. Me being who I am, and that's where God put me. He allowed me to be a face in this industry. And as well as I know, the tactical industry, the veteran space, it's a very competitive space because, there's a lot of hard hitters out there, a lot of legit guys with great backgrounds. But, he allowed me to be, a face in that space, and I'm truly grateful. And I get to work with amazing companies. My gun room is literally a room, top to bottom, top to the ceiling, to the floor, all around the room, just guns. But a lot of these guns are like specialized Ronin guns that, was built for me to test out and try.
Yeah, that's so amazing. The impossible question to answer: if you could only have one pistol and one rifle, if you have to get rid of everything else in your gun room, you only get to keep one of each. Is that impossible to answer? Probably.
I love my Staccato XC. That's just a great gun. It feels good in my hands. It's fun to shoot.
It makes you feel like you shoot better than you can.
It shoots for you.
It probably does shoot better than you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So Staccato XC for a pistol. I like my Sons of Liberty 11.5 inch barrel with the Huxwork suppressor on there. I think it feels like a team rifle again. So I built it like I would carry it on the teams, and working with Hollison Optics, mounting lasers, Taclite, and being able to work with these companies. But those are the two that I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have not shot a Sons of Liberty. I should probably get one because I've actually been almost linked up with the owner a number of times to come on the show, and I feel like we've gone back and forth about making it happen and just haven't. But I'll have to look into that. I'm not, I think, near the gun nut that a lot of people would assume that I am. But man, that's great stuff.
And I like what they stand for. The great group of guys, great company, but what they stand for. The American gun and who they work with within the industry, working with Team 6 and the Navy guys, like it's, legit background, so.
Yeah. I'm curious, I kind of alluded to it, I guess, a little bit ago, but in terms of kind of the Bushido and I guess you'd call it, mantra or even maybe methodology that you've spent most of your life kind of adhering to in one way or another, do Do you feel like you're still drawn to that and subscribe to that, or do you feel like your walk with Christ has pivoted you in a way where you don't really look at it that same way anymore?
My walk with Christ is stronger. I feel like the Bushido and that did carry me, and I want to touch base on this because I do get made fun of a lot online because I'm Vietnamese and why the whole Bushido code. First, I think a warrior code is beyond any culture. Like I could take Knights of the Templars code of conduct with Christ and I can apply it to my life. I could take, the Viking code and apply it to my life, right? Like the warrior code is beyond any culture, and being on social media, I do get made fun of because I'm Vietnamese and I took on the Bushido code. The Bushido code came to me when I was that child that was so insecure, didn't fit in, and it gave me it's almost like an azimuth to the warrior. But when I found Christ, the Bushido, I still talk about it because it's still morally and ethically correct as a warrior, and a lot of young warriors that's what they resonate with more than Christ. If I talk about Christ, a lot of the young ones that wants to be a Navy SEAL or a Green Beret, they kind of resonate with, I want to hear warrior stuff, which I totally understand because I was there, But where I am today is Christ is all I need. And in fact, the psychedelic stuff that I went down, a lot of people ask me too, do you recommend psychedelics? Do I, in my walk with Christ, after you find Christ, you don't need it. The Holy Spirit will guide you through everything you need. Before Christ, I feel like each their own journey, right? Yeah. But no, if you were to say Bushido, Christ, it's all Christ now.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've talked about there's the freeing the oppressed kind of recurring theme both in your walk with Christ as well as your military service. If you had the ability to spiritually be where you're at now and time machine yourself back to the 18-year-old you, do you still join the military and go through that entire pipeline with where you're at faith-wise now?
I feel like God picks his warriors, just like he picks you before the world was created. He knew what was in your heart. He knew that you're a warrior before the world was created, right? And I feel like we're a different breed. We're a different breed. Warriors are a different breed. We have a calling that we have to fulfill. If I found Christ at 18, I would have walked down that route because I would still experience the oppression and the need to draw on to free the oppressed. But I don't think I would have been that sinner, that guy who hated, envy, because that's what Jesus came. He came to save the sinners, right? He sat with the sinners, and So I seen a lot of warriors that had Christ, when they fought the war, and they were savages. I couldn't have been that savage.
You could have, or couldn't?
I could not have been that savage. I felt like if I had Christ, I couldn't have been that. I was a monster at one point, and monsters are needed in that space of darkness, war, right? You have to be that monster. And because I was that monster, that's why he saved me, I felt. He's here to save the sinners, If I had Christ during my walk, because I don't regret anything because he's perfect. Right, so when you're saved, you could look back in your life, and he had a hand on every aspect of your life, even though you felt like he wasn't there. I had to be that hateful, unsecure sinner that had to prove myself to the world, right? I had to be that, and that was my story. If I had Christ at 18, I wouldn't have been that.
Yeah.
So I respect his journey.
Is there any part of you that can or does reflect on, really what we just talked about with, we both kind of view Iraq in the rearview mirror as a mistake, which of course is way easier to do looking backward than as we're going into it. And I'm not naive to the fact that it was very shortly after. I mean, we're still feeling the sting of 9/11 and not wanting to get caught with our pants down again. And so I think it is important to bring that up, because it's easy to look at it now and be like, well, that was dumb. It's like, well, remember, when 9/11 happened, we were kind of like, we were hyper aware of trying to be proactive and not let something like that happen again. So I think some grace is important in that regard. However, the thing that I find myself thinking about is, in a war environment, obviously we all sign up, and sign the dotted line to defend the Constitution and America's enemies, and foreign and domestic, and that's all of our intent and goal and desire is to do that to the best of our ability with where the country asks us to do that. But when you look at things like Iraq and other things that we're doing currently and have done over the historical context of the nation, that's the part I wonder if there's conflict with you of thinking about being in that position now and what America's actions are right now and how do they fit into what makes sense from a higher power standpoint, and are we making the right decisions? Are we electing the right people that are making decisions based on what's best for humanity and not just their shareholder donor buddies that are getting filthy rich because of the different military actions that we're taking? Do you have a perspective on that?
I feel that the elites, the politicians, they have their own agendas. Why the Middle East? Like, okay, so you have weapons of mass destruction everywhere, like North Korea, China, Russia. Like, why the Middle East? And as much as I do, there's a lot of natural resources out there. There's a lot of investments out there. So I feel like the elites, the politicians, these wars are some of these are proxy wars, like Ukraine. Like there's incentives, there's motives beyond like the safety of America. And that's what I see, and unfortunately people are misplaced, people die because of these decisions of greed, right? And it makes me realize like how far we have drifted off of like away from God, and you could tell like these decisions, they drift us from God.
Yeah.
There's no compassion for people. There's no love there, right? It's just to take and to own it. And for what?
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And it's sad, but again, focus on what you can control and your own path, and you'll be a lot happier that way. Is there anything that I haven't asked you or brought up that I should have, or that you'd like to talk about?
I want to talk about marriage. Like I'm sure the SEAL teams are saying high divorce rate.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're far more likely to get divorced than to stay together, for sure. Most guys are.
A lot of even team guys now, they deploy a lot just to get away from their wives. Like a lot of them, they deploy, they live, in a very sinful life. And God calls us to be the guardian of our marriage, and I never really understood that until I found Christ. Like there's a responsibility for a man in a marriage, and it's to guide his family to Christ. And marriage in special operations, even the military, is very difficult. And I feel like if you have God, if you have faith, the marriage will make it. If you don't, it's not going to make it. And I want to just send out encouragement to the spouses, and I want to praise the spouses because they put up with a lot of stuff. Post military and military, and I want to praise them for loving us and supporting us, because truly we couldn't have done it. Like I know, like I couldn't have done it with my wife. I couldn't have done the career without her support. And then after the military, when I lost my wife, she's the one, that forgave me and loved me regardless. So she reflected Jesus in front of me, and I feel like that's what led me to Jesus. And I feel, like that's what we're called to do, is to bring our spouse to Jesus, to have that communion with God through our marriage, because that was the covenant, right? So I just want to bring that up, marriage in the military. I mean, a lot of military are deployed right now. Marriage is hard. I see it in the unit. I see it through group. And I just want to send, encouragement to the spouse. Thank you for what you've done, but also we couldn't have done it without you.
That's an incredibly important point, because that, they really and literally hold the fort down, and put up with a lot and rarely get any recognition for it, and I think especially the part where, it's afterwards, it's one thing like, oh, the boys are on deployment, let's, rally the wives and take care of them and whatever. It's the years afterward, that they still have to put up with the baggage that we bring home, and the short temper, and, the issues that maybe a lot of us don't even realize that we have, or how they're manifesting, what they're manifesting into, where I think they largely get forgotten about, and so I appreciate you bringing that up. That's a super important part of it for sure.
Thank you.
Anything else? No? Well, I am thankful for you coming and sharing your message, and I thank God for putting the two of us in this room today. And it's super encouraging to hear your story and follow your path and journey, and see where you started and how far you've come and where you're at now, and no doubt where you'll continue to go in the future. And it's super encouraging, and it's just such a beautiful story. I appreciate you sharing it.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah. For the listener/viewer, I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, you can choke yourself. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.